This young man stood there with his mouth hanging open, because in the blink of an eye, he suddenly found himself in the middle of hell. The next notification he received was, "You have died from fine dust poisoning." In this world, things called dungeons appeared 35 years ago, and every day, ordinary citizens awaken. Supernatural powers far beyond normal people. Hyun-gu, unfortunately, was not among them. That was why he was still dirt poor and living an extremely difficult life. Everything began to change one day when Hyun-gu received a necklace. The lawyer who gave it to him said it was a keepsake left behind by his father. What the hell? He was clearly an orphan. So where did this father who left him something come from? But when Hyun-gu gripped it tightly in his hand, suddenly, dazzling red rays of light burst from his palm. The scenery before him also changed rapidly. 1 second, Hyun-gu had been lying on his bed. The next, he was standing in the middle of a ruined city. This scared the young man so badly he nearly wet his pants. At the same time, a virtual window appeared in front of him. On it was a notification saying that Hyun-gu's body had now awakened mana. Before he could even get over that shock, a whole pile of virtual windows popped up before him. And what confused Hyun-gu the most was the notification standing right in front of him. You are the final survivor. While he was panicking, a shimmering purple light fell into Hyun-gu's line of sight. The young man quickly went from one shock to another, because in front of him was an enormous cluster of luminescent crystal. Its price would probably reach several tens of millions of gold. But before he could rejoice over striking it rich, Hyun-gu felt his chest tighten, struggled to breathe, and quickly collapsed. The virtual window appeared again, notifying him that Hyun-gu was in a poisoned state. After struggling for a while, the system finally concluded that Hyun-gu had died from fine dust poisoning. The total time from when he arrived here to when he died was only a little over 4 minutes. Truly, it was a completely ridiculous death. He thought he was dead, yet this young man still woke up perfectly healthy, as if nothing had happened. A new mission appeared in front of him, requiring Hyun-gu to survive until sunrise. Although he had no idea what was going on, the young man still put his head down and ran for his life. But no matter whether he clenched up like his life depended on it or inhaled as much fine dust as possible to fight poison with poison, the final result was still the notification, "You have died." Hyun-gu broke down. But he also realized that his survival time had gradually increased after dying 14 times. Hyun-gu suddenly remembered that when he was little, a strange man had taught him a breathing technique. So he stopped running and simply sat down calmly, taking deep breaths. After dying 28 times, Hyun-gu felt his body become light as a feather. The virtual window appeared again, but this time it was not the words, "You have died." The system announced that Hyun-gu had learned a rare skill called poison blood. From now on, this young man would no longer take damage from toxins. In simple terms, he had inhaled so much fine dust that his whole body was now filled with poison. It was a bit absurd, but gaining a new skill was still something worth celebrating. In this place, luminescent crystals were scattered everywhere. If he could gather them all, he would definitely become filthy rich. While Hyun-gu was still wishing that this pile of luminescent crystals was real, the virtual window appeared again. On it was the notification, "Do you want to collect the luminescent crystal?" What if he would say no? As soon as Hyun-gu agreed, the huge crystal in his hand disappeared. At the same time, the system also notified him that his inventory had been activated. He had not even been happy for 3 seconds when this unlucky young man's 80-second calamity arrived. From far away, a terrifyingly large swarm of mosquitoes was flying toward him at an equally terrifying speed. Of the 36 strategies, running away is the best. So Hyun-gu turned and bolted. But there were too many enemies, and they were too ferocious, so in the end the young man was eaten to death by the entire swarm of mosquitoes. The mosquitoes, swollen round like balls after drinking Hyun-gu's blood, suddenly exploded. It turned out that because the young man's blood was full of toxins, he had poisoned the entire swarm of mosquitoes to death at the same time. Because of that, Hyun-gu both strengthened his poison blood and leveled up. He should have been happy, but before he could rejoice, the system notified him that Hyun-gu had fallen into a diseased state and would gradually lose health. The young man was so furious he could barely stand. When he accidentally fell and broke a chair, he learned the dismantling skill. A whole pile of virtual windows continuously displayed notifications like end-of-month bills. Hyun-gu was too lazy to care and let the system do its own thing. While fiddling around, the young man even learned the crafting skill. With the 2 skills he had just learned, Hyun-gu immediately got to work building a shelter to survive in this ruined place. Since he did not know how long he would be trapped here or what enemies he would have to face, Hyun-gu resolved to create a safe base. While wandering around, he picked up a newspaper. Although he did not really understand the language on it, Hyun-gu noticed one thing. The newspaper mentioned the name Lee Jin-tae from the Taezong Guild. This made him wonder whether this ruined place might be his original world many years in the future. Since he could not solve that question right away, Hyun-gu got to work on his own tasks. The huge mosquitoes were all dismantled by this young man into separate parts. He tried crafting a few vials of mosquito blood. As a result, he obtained several arrows. Though he did not yet know how powerful they were still well worth researching. Hyun-gu gathered all the materials he had just dismantled and crafted them in one go. As a result, he received a legendary grade item called the Mysterious Egg. According to the system's instructions, this egg only had a 50% survival rate. Because of that, Hyun-gu suddenly came up with a rather stupid idea. The young man put the egg inside his shirt and started incubating it. The egg had not had time to hatch before danger arrived. In the ruined building where Hyun-gu was temporarily sheltering, a goblin suddenly appeared, carrying a sword. As soon as Hyun-gu poked his head out to look, he was discovered by this ugly creature. It charged at him like a missile, slashing wildly. Hyun-gu was at least quick on his feet, dodging while running from its attacks. But running forever was not a solution. Hyun-gu opened his inventory to look for a weapon. He thought the young man might pull out something useful, but it turned out to be only the chair leg he had dismantled earlier. This goblin was level 20, extremely fast, and holding a sharp sword. Hyun-gu was naturally no match for it. The wooden stick in his hand was chopped to pieces, so Hyun-gu had no choice but to take out the arrows crafted from mosquito blood and throw them straight at the monster. One arrow luckily stabbed into the goblin's right hand. The arrow's poison took effect instantly, causing its hand to begin swelling and blistering in an extremely terrifying way. But this monster was even crazier. It immediately raised its sword and cut off its own right hand. While Hyun-gu was still dazed, thinking about the effects of poison, blood, the goblin vanished from sight in the blink of an eye. It turned out that it had leaped above his head. By the time Hyun-gu noticed, it was already too late. Its sword had already slashed down in a clean, sharp stroke. Hyun-gu fell into a pool of blood. The monster also left, leaving behind one sentence: humanity still exists. With the halo of a male lead, Hyun-gu naturally could not actually die. As soon as the goblin left, he was revived. The sky had just brightened as well, and the mission to survive until dawn was completed. Hyun-gu received a golden chest as a reward. At the same time, the system also announced that the next mission would be in 14 days. The reappearance stone on his chest became hotter than ever. Hyun-gu gripped the stone tightly in his hand. When he opened his eyes, he had returned to the world he originally lived in. Needless to say, the young man was so happy he looked even crazier than a rabid dog. Thinking about the hardships he had just gone through, Hyun-gu immediately yanked the necklace off his neck, intending to throw it away. But alongside all the suffering, this young man had also received all sorts of things, from luminescent crystals to mana. So after thinking it over, Hyun-gu still could not bring himself to throw away the reappearance stone. Roman discovered Hyun-gu sitting outside the mana processing industrial complex in the rain. Worried that his mana had been contaminated, she wrapped Hyun-gu up tightly like a rice dumpling in a raincoat. Hyun-gu was washed clean. Roman even gave him a mana detox tablet. How could someone be so pretty and so considerate at the same time? After asking about it, Hyun-gu learned that he had been missing here for 2 days. Although it had only been 2 days, the time in hell had felt as long as an entire year. But there was a more urgent problem before them. Hyun-gu's old clothes were torn to shreds. Roman could not stand him wandering around her house completely naked, so she went out to buy Hyun-gu a new set of clothes. As soon as Roman left, the virtual window appeared in front of Hyun-gu again. It turned out that even after returning to this world, the system was still in effect. This young man was truly luckier than a dog stumbling into a windfall. He tapped on the golden chest he had just received as a reward and immediately unlocked a legendary skill called Battle Assistant. In this world, simply having a rare skill was already outstanding. And currently, in the entire world, there were only 7 people with legendary skills. Roman came home and gave Hyungu a new outfit. She was quite puzzled as to why Hyungu had powers, but had chosen to become an ordinary crystal collector. Hyungu simply explained vaguely that he had only just awakened. But what happened next shocked Roman to the core. Right in front of her, Hyungu pulled out an enormous luminescent crystal weighing up to 1 kilogram and asked her to take a look. As someone who researched luminescent crystals, Roman was so shocked her jaw dropped. The crystal Hyungu had just pulled out was both large and highly pure, at least reaching 5-star grade. Hyungu promised to tell her how he obtained this pile if Roman agreed to sell it and make money for him. But selling such a large and pure luminescent crystal was rather difficult because it required a lot of paperwork. As soon as Hyungu heard that, he broke the crystal in half with his bare hands, making Roman so furious she nearly cried from the waist. Only when Hyungu said he still had many more crystals like that did she calm down a little. After negotiating for a while, the two finalized that Roman would take the crystals and sell them for Hyungu. However, she was not allowed to tell anyone the origin of these crystals, nor was she allowed to tell anyone that Hyungu was the one selling them. Once everything was settled, Hyungu planned to leave, but Roman asked him to stay. The next morning, Roman left the house in high spirits. Meanwhile, Hyungu sat dazed on the bed, looking as if he had been abused all night. So as for what happened last night, you can imagine it for yourself. 1 week later, Roman and Hyungu arrived at the agreed location to trade with the crystal buyer. Although Roman had said he did not need to come along, Hyungu was afraid that this valuable transaction would put Roman in danger, so he still stayed right by her side. The person who came for the transaction was an old man named Park Ui-soo. With just a handshake, Hyungu sensed the other party's strength. He was not even sure whether he would be able to win if the old man attacked. However, Park Ui-soo simply checked the bag of crystals once and then transferred the money to Roman's account. Although the transaction went more smoothly than expected, before leaving, Park Ui-soo even tipped his hat to Hyungu in farewell. This overly formal action made chills run down Hyungu's spine, and he worried about whether the old man knew that he was actually the one who had dug up these crystals. In the end, more than 1 billion won was immediately added to Roman's account. Hyungu had truly changed his life faster than your ex could change their attitude. Park Ui-soo returned to the car. Inside the car, a man in a white suit was already waiting. The man toyed with the crystal in his hand. The purity of these crystals was proof that they had been found in a 5-star dungeon, and the person who collected them was definitely a very powerful hunter. Although they did not yet know that hunter's identity, the strange man and Park Ui-soo also had some doubts about Hyungu's identity. Because of that, he ordered Park Ui-soo to investigate Roman's identity and the person who had come to the transaction with her, meaning Hyungu, more thoroughly. One might have thought he was some rich second-generation heir, but in the end, it turned out that the man in the white suit, sitting in the car with Park Ui-soo, was none other than Lee Jin-tae. A few days later, Hyungu was training furiously in hell. His strength had increased significantly. After going back and forth between hell and the world he lived in several times, Hyungu had basically understood the situation. First, however long he spent in hell, the same amount of time would pass outside in the real world. The waiting time between missions was the same. However, every time Hyungu returned from hell, his location changed and was never the same. This made Hyungu furious. As for the battle assistant skill he had obtained a few days earlier, Hyungu now understood its mechanism as well. Since there were no new enemies yet, Hyungu was still training with a punching bag. This skill had recorded his movements. After that, it optimized those movements and even assisted Hyungu's decisions by predicting the opponent's movement direction. Although having the skill was no different from cheating in a game, it was still pretty amazing. Hyungu's second mission arrived. It was to eliminate 5 rookie scarecrows. This young man still had his pride, after all. He had already reached level 7, yet the system was making him solo a bunch of rookie scarecrows. However, a mission still had to be completed. Hyun-gu put on more clothes and began searching for his targets. When he reached the basement of a ruined building, Hyun-gu finally found the 5 scarecrows. They looked both ugly and terrifying, but on the virtual window, their levels only showed question marks. The name Rookie Scarecrow made them sound easy to handle, but he could only feel at ease by making absolutely sure. So Hyun-gu hid behind a door and tried throwing a poison blood arrow at the scarecrows. As a result, they did not move at all. Thinking this match would be easy, Hyun-gu jumped out and punched one scarecrow straight in the face. Although he had put all his strength into it, Hyun-gu felt as if he had just punched air. At that moment, the scarecrows also began to change. After twisting around for a while, the eyes of all 5 scarecrows lit up. They had finished confirming their opponent and automatically adjusted their levels to match Hyun-gu's. Although these scarecrows were slower than the goblin from before, there were 5 of them. And in the real world, level 7 was equivalent to warriors with at least 5 years of experience. So Hyun-gu had a fairly hard time once the fight began. Of course, he did not want to get beaten up, so immediately afterward, the young man activated the battle assistant skill he had just learned. At first, thanks to this skill, Hyun-gu dodged their attacks quite effectively. Then Scarecrow number 2 put him in a chokehold from behind. Hyun-gu drove his elbow back hard, then put all his strength into throwing a punch. Half of the Scarecrow's face shattered, but they quickly updated their data from that punch and raised the sparring level to level 2. Hyun-gu was immediately rushed by 4 scarecrows at once, who pinned down his arms and legs. The remaining one immediately charged forward and returned the punch to him. And it did not just return one punch. It was generous enough to keep punching him repeatedly until Hyun-gu collapsed completely. With the title of Hell's strongest, even after being defeated, Hyun-gu was quickly revived. He took a staff out of his inventory. Then he strengthened it. Although it only lasted for a short time, his combat power increased tremendously. Hyun-gu shot forward like an arrow, smashing the staff into one scarecrow and causing its arm to snap off completely. He thought victory and defeat had already been decided, but they immediately updated the data and raised the sparring level again. Each scarecrow pulled out a different weapon, from swords and maces to axes. Needless to say, the result was obvious. After dying a few times, Hyun-gu realized he could not fight 1 against 5. So, although it was a rather cowardly method, he tied several scarecrows to the pillars and fought the remaining one-on-one. Hyun-gu also discovered the key point inside each scarecrow. As long as he destroyed it, he could bring them down. But because they kept updating their combat data, they grew stronger and stronger. The same was true for Hyun-gu's combat power and damage resistance. After getting thoroughly beaten and dying who knew how many times, Hyun-gu was completely exhausted. Although the scarecrow was broken here and crushed there, to the point that its original shape was almost unrecognizable, its combat power was still extremely high. It walked up to Hyun-gu and took a stance, while he was also fired up and ready to exchange fists with it. The two rushed at each other again and beat each other up for a while, and Hyun-gu successfully landed a kick on it. But this also activated sparring mode level 4. In a flash, the scarecrow jabbed 2 fingers straight into Hyun-gu's eyes, making him collapse to the ground. Right after that, it opened its mouth wide and bit straight into Hyun-gu's leg. They were clearly having a fist fight, so how did it turn into a dogfight in the end? Hyun-gu was in so much pain he nearly died, swearing nonstop, but in the end he was still bitten to death by the scarecrow. After dying 9 times in this mission, Hyun-gu was finally able to gain some combat experience. First, sparring mode stopped at level 4 and did not increase any further. Second, the scarecrows had fixed movement values, and if there was any discrepancy, they would stop and adjust. And third, there was no need to destroy them, because once they took enough damage, the scarecrow's movements would stop. The scene was an indescribable mess, but in the end, after a cycle of getting beaten, then beating them back, then getting beaten again, Hyun-gu successfully brought down the 5 scarecrows. His mission was complete, and the scarecrows had been punched to pieces, with each part scattered in a different place. Hyun-gu broke into a triumphant smile, then collapsed onto the floor from exhaustion. Just like last time, Hyun-gu received a reward after the mission. was completed. It was the cradle cloth of the heavenly realm. It sounded fancy, but in reality, it was just a piece of fabric. Its function was to accelerate growth and completely heal wounds on the body. However, Hyun-gu was always reborn without a single injury after every death, so that healing function was completely useless to him. As for what accelerating growth meant, he had no idea. So for the time being, he decided to put it away and sell it for money later. When he opened his inventory, Hyun-gu finally remembered that he still had an egg from crafting the pile of mosquito corpses last time. Suddenly having a rare flash of intelligence, Hyun-gu came up with the idea of using that cloth on this egg. And sure enough, it worked. The eggshell gradually cracked, then burst apart. Inside the shell was a baby sleeping soundly. However, it was only the size of a fist, and on its back there were for wings. Curious, Hyun-gu reached out a finger to touch the baby, only for it to bite him painfully. In pain, he shook his hand violently, nearly sending the little thing off to meet its ancestors. Although he was rather annoyed, when the little girl said she was hungry, Hyun-gu, with the heart of a parent, went to find food for her. However, this little one refused to eat anything and only wanted to suck Hyun-gu's blood. He had no choice but to reluctantly agree to her request, and Hyun-gu's feelings were extremely complicated. It seemed the egg he had received from chopping up those mosquitoes had produced this freakish thing, so she was probably a mosquito fairy. However, the little girl refused to accept the identity of a mosquito fairy. She introduced herself as the fairy who was supposed to appear at the final moment. At first, Hyun-gu thought this little brat had come to save the world. Unexpectedly, she replied that she had come to eat all remaining living creatures when the world's catastrophe occurred. Hearing this, Hyun-gu began to wonder whether he should just strangle this little thing to death right now. But at this moment, what bothered Hyun-gu the most was actually why this little brat had absolutely no reaction after drinking his blood. After all, that blood was supposed to be extremely poisonous. He also had no idea how to deal with her. So for now, Hyun-gu gave her a new name, Renian. After negotiating for a while, Hyun-gu decided to keep Renian by his side. Of course, the condition was that the little girl was not allowed to eat people. If she got too hungry, she could make do by eating someone else, but she absolutely could not bite Hyun-gu. What a genius. My hometown is full of people as smart as this guy. In return, he would occasionally nourish Renian with a bit of his blood, so the little brat happily agreed. The rookie scarecrows scattered across the floor aroused Renian's curiosity. While explaining them to her, Hyun-gu suddenly noticed a scarecrow that had been split in half at the waist. He could not remember having enough strength to cut such a powerful opponent in two. While he was still confused, the virtual window popped up again, announcing that a new trait had been added to Hyun-gu's battle assistant skill, and anything new had to be tested while it was hot. Once he thought of it, Hyun-gu acted. He set up a scarecrow and threw a punch, and it immediately shattered into many pieces. His strength had clearly increased greatly, to the point that Hyun-gu himself, the owner of that strength, could only gape in astonishment. The scene of punching and kicking just now made Renian extremely excited. She also rushed up and punched the scarecrow in front of her. The result shocked Hyun-gu even more, because this little girl's body was only half the size of a palm, yet her strength was even greater than his. And Renian's punch activated opponent confirmation mode in the remaining scarecrows. Hyun-gu was stunned, thinking he would have to fight again. But strangely, the scarecrows merely gathered in a circle around him. They identified Hyun-gu as a superhuman and stopped attacking. Instead, one of them raised its hand and pointed at the messy pile in the corner of the room. When Hyun-gu rummaged through the mess, he found a white skeleton collapsed over a table. Renian picked up one of the skeleton's finger bones, stuffed it into her mouth, and chewed it, which made Hyun-gu feel utterly disgusted. The letter in the white skeleton's hand caught Hyun-gu's eye. The letter mentioned that Hell's level had risen to nightmare. The world was becoming increasingly contaminated. High-ranking ability users were committing suicide one after another, and humanity was falling toward extinction. Together with the information the system had given Hyun-gu when he first arrived here, he became even more certain that this ruined world was the future of the real world where he lived. Renian rummaged through the skeleton and found a stone engraved with some eye-catching mark. With a glance, Hyun-gu knew it was a reappearance stone, though it was slightly different from his own. The moment he touched it, the stone emitted a blinding golden light and an incredibly terrifying energy. After that, it completely disappeared, But the mark engraved on that stone appeared on Hyungu's palm and could not be erased. The system issued a notification. The stars are watching you. The ceiling instantly cracked apart, and the universe seemed to be falling down. Renian backed away, while Hyungu was quickly swept into the boundless void of space. Hyungu drifted through endless midair. He could clearly feel the stars drifting past. Before his eyes, the young man panicked so badly that he began swearing all over again. And the system appeared just in time to explain the situation before him. A very long time ago, there were people so powerful that they could possess stars, and they had absolute dominion over their territory somewhere in this universe. These people divided their peerless power into fragments and lent those fragments out, scattering them everywhere. They did this in the hope that their species could later use the power within those fragments to grow stronger and expand their territory. And Hyungu was someone who had taken possession of one of those fragments. When the system explained this much, he finally realized that the stone Renian had found was not a reappearance stone, but a power fragment, and he had accidentally absorbed it. Strange sounds appeared above his head. Immediately afterward, 5 stars fell and surrounded Hyungu. According to the system, each of these stars promised to provide Hyungu with some lucrative resources because they had seen his potential and wanted to invest in him. However, among these 5 stars, Hyungu could only choose one to follow. The shattered star was the incarnation of Gao. He ruled over everything through daggers, poison, and schemes behind the curtain. His movements were extremely mysterious because he always hid himself in the darkness and acted secretly through covert organizations. The Wailing Star was the incarnation of Veer. He possessed an army of the undead and could control them at will. This person was obsessed with watching humanity's despair, confusion, and helpless struggle. The Star of Starvation was the incarnation of Iogolim. He had the form of a greedy snake that never knew satisfaction, always wishing to swallow everything in the world. In the territory he ruled, countless people had died, and all the people were threatened by prolonged famine. The Whispering Star was the incarnation of Morchin. Contrary to the 3 gloomy men above, this woman had the appearance of an angel. She radiated splendor with shimmering light, but her ability to deceive was so perfect that any powerful entity would have to kneel at her feet. The Star of Conquest was the incarnation of Acton. He was a warrior who stepped out from the flames, desiring to slaughter his enemies with weapons of steel. With an endless and meaningless hatred, he always wanted to burn the whole world to ashes and crown himself king over the ruins. Hyungu was as confused as a duck listening to thunder, because all 5 of these people gave him the feeling that they were mentally ill and had serious personality problems. However, to choose between these 5 stars, he wanted to know where his future would lead. Gao was the one who painted a vision for Hyungu. If he chose to follow the stars, he would gain immensely great power, allowing him to destroy countless monsters, or he could even become an influential speaker of great stature, or even become a high-ranking soldier. Of course, such a perfect future would require a price. And the price Hyungu had to pay was to follow and serve that entity. It sounded grand, but in reality, it was almost as if Hyungu did not have to pay any price at all. Still, making a choice remained a difficult problem. For him, this guy must have been a Libra. So after he haggled for a while like he was bargaining at a market, the system brought Hyungu back to the hell of the present reality. Morchin, the Whispering Star, followed Hyungu. She made a cut on his hand to awaken a portion of his power. To put it nicely, this was a trial experience. To put it accurately, it was a bribe. However, there was still a huge question in Hyungu's heart. Why were the stars, with such supernatural power, unable to stop hell's difficulty from increasing? Or were they themselves the ones who created this hell? Putting aside the matter of the stars for the time being, Hyungu returned to the real world. As usual, the young man could not decide the location he would return to. So he appeared looking so disheveled that people would believe it if someone said he had just been dug out of a trash heap. After returning home, Hyungu expressed his intention to buy a new house too, Roman. But the situation did not seem very optimistic because although Hyungu currently had a lot of money, all of that money was illegal money obtained from selling luminescent crystals. Moreover, he had not registered to become an official ability user yet, so buying a house under his own name would become something many people would gossip about. Hyun-gu himself also felt that Roman made a lot of sense. Therefore, he began considering registering as an official ability user and trying to upgrade his own strength. Thinking of this, Hyun-gu remembered the vision the stars had painted. That astonishing ability was something anyone would desire. Suddenly, the young man became greedy. He no longer wanted to choose one of the 5 stars. He wanted all of them. If it were me, I would do the same. Only children choose one. Adults want them all. During the meal, the TV broadcast more news about Lee Jin-tae. He and his Taezong Guild had just announced the exploration and sealing of the Baekru dungeon. This was one of the 5-star dungeons with countless monsters, and all of these monsters had also reached the 5-star rank. So without good mana and weapons, facing these monsters was completely impossible. Hyun-gu was not too interested in Lee Jin-tae, so he changed the channel. The TV then delivered another piece of news that interested him more. The ability test to become an ability user would be held within the next 3 days. This happened to be the right opportunity for Hyun-gu to obtain an official status. On the day of the test, the number of people who came for the assessment was as dense as ants. While talking to a middle-aged man, Hyun-gu learned that the Taezong Guild was also recruiting new members here today in preparation for the Baekru dungeon exploration. So in addition to rookies like Hyun-gu who had come for the assessment, countless hunters had also come to apply. No wonder it was packed as hell. Finally, it was Hyun-gu's turn to register for the test. There were a total of 3 preliminary test rounds here. The first round was identity verification. Simply put, it was just checking personal documents to confirm identity. The second round was a stat test. This was also quite simple. They only needed to take blood for testing. The final round was a combat ability evaluation. It sounded like they would have to fight, but in reality, the person being tested only had to put their hand into a machine and tightly grip the marble inside. However, when it was Hyun-gu's turn to be tested, something happened that no one could have anticipated. Because Hyun-gu's strength far exceeded that of ordinary people, his score shot far beyond the limit. However, the 2 staff members did not suspect anything, because Lee Jin-tae had just been tested on this very machine, and it had been normal. And of course, they would never imagine that an unknown rookie like Hyun-gu could be stronger than Lee Jin-tae. After adjusting the machine, Hyun-gu was allowed to try again. The young man also tried his best to suppress his strength as much as possible. But in the end, the result was still that the machine completely lost connection to the server. Therefore, he had no choice but to gloomily take a result sheet marked pending review, even though other people would normally receive their score right away. After passing the 3 preliminary tests, the candidates were divided into 3 groups: attack, defense, and the remaining group for those with support abilities or unclear, ambiguous abilities. Hyun-gu was still unclear about his own ability, so he chose the final group. Right after the preliminary test, this hot-blooded young man immediately chose to take the hunter skill test as well. Before he registered, the staff member kindly reminded him of the dangers of becoming a hunter, as well as the fact that not everyone who became a hunter would become rich. But Hyun-gu passionately declared his ambition to become a hunter in order to protect humanity, leaving the female staff member with no choice but to smile awkwardly. Meanwhile, Lee Jin-tae appeared at the assessment site. It had to be admitted that this guy was handsome and famous. When he got out of the car, countless fans were standing there waiting. Who knew whether he was a hunter or a K-pop idol? This assessment also featured a group of independent ability users called the Red Butterfly. They possessed great talent, judgment, and skill, but they refused to join any guild and lived quite reclusively. But once information about the exploration of the Baekru dungeon in the north appeared, all members of the Red Butterfly came to participate in the assessment. Even Lee Jin-tae paid special attention to this group of ability users. But Hyun-gu accidentally drew the attention of Lee Jin-tae's subordinates. The fact that Hyun-gu had the poison blood ability, along with all images and videos from his test, was sent to Lee Jin-tae for review. However, he did not think too highly of this special ability, nor did he become wary or suspicious. That is all. Back to Hyun-gu. This young man, along with 4 others, is waiting to take the hunter skill test. Suddenly, a staff member appears and hands Hyun-gu something. The young man cannot understand what it is, but the staff member does not bother explaining any further. I do not know what it is either, so let us skip the explanation for now. All 5 of them will have their skills tested in a training dungeon modeled after a 2-star dungeon in Ukraine. The test lasts 3 hours, and the goal is to collect as many items as possible. The candidates, Hyungu included, are all fired up. And perhaps this young man has no idea that his entire testing process will be observed by Lee Jin-tae. In the training dungeon, each candidate carries 1 item, while the monsters carry 1 to 3 items. So, to avoid becoming prey, the bespectacled candidate takes the initiative and suggests that the 5 of them team up for safety. However, Hyungu refuses because he does not want to share the items he earns with anyone else. This young man is exactly like me in this regard. Instead of teamwork, it is better to work alone and stay in control. A huge candidate is extremely annoyed by Hyungu's attitude, and he also thinks this young man will be easy pickings. So when Hyungu turns to leave, he grabs Hyungu by the collar, intending to steal his item. However, the protagonist is still the protagonist. With just 1 punch, Hyungu knocks the big guy flat, and he takes the man's item as well. Seeing the situation, the bespectacled candidate who suggested teaming up earlier takes the initiative to surrender and hands his item over to Hyungu. Although they're not exactly willing, the big guy Hyungu just sent eating dirt has a shield skill. The others in the team can no longer beat him either, so they have no choice but to accept it. Meanwhile, the long-haired girl from the Red Butterfly group does exactly the same thing as Hyungu. As soon as she enters the dungeon, she takes all the items from the people who came in with her. But this Red Butterfly girl soon encounters her first obstacle. It is an automated robot equipped with combat gloves and an outer layer made from the spores of mushroom monsters found in the Chernobyl dungeon. They have terrifying combat skills. At the same time, many ability users in the dungeon have already been getting beaten badly by this type of robot. In fact, this robot is very easy to defeat for teams that coordinate well. Because of that, solo-loving individuals like the long-haired girl from Red Butterfly still need quite some time before they can take control of the situation. And since the item is installed deep inside the robot, taking it out is also rather difficult. Lee Jin-tae had originally been focused only on the people from Red Butterfly, but on the camera, someone suddenly makes him look away. That person is none other than Hyungu. Compared to the rookie scarecrows that once fed Hyungu a beating, this robot is much easier to deal with. So knocking him down one by one is far too simple for him. In just a short while, the number of mushroom spore robots that have fallen at Hyungu's hands reaches double digits. He can also use his separation skill to smoothly obtain the items inside. After 34 minutes, the organizers announce the top 3 people holding the most items. Second and third place are respectively people from the Red Butterfly group. In first place is Hyungu with 16 items. While separating the robots, Hyungu also collects some interesting things, their durable skin. After that, the young man uses his crafting skill to create a pair of leg guards and a pair of arm guards. With a bit more protective gear, Hyungu becomes even more enthusiastic. Meanwhile, the long-haired girl from Red Butterfly is still gnashing her teeth in anger because she has fewer items than Hyungu. From who knows where, several other ability users appear, intending to gang up on her and steal her items. But Red Butterfly's strength is not just an empty reputation. The girl fights as if she is dancing, yet in the blink of an eye, she knocks down those 3 arrogant guys. However, after them, many more ability users come rushing over. Their numbers must reach several dozen. Using sheer numbers to crush someone like this is a bit too much. Just as the girl takes a stance, ready to fight, countless weak ability users are sent flying into the sky from outside the encirclement. It turns out the other members of Red Butterfly have arrived. It turns out this long-haired girl is named Un. The original goal of the Red Butterfly group was to meet up with the Northern Bakery Dungeon Exploration team, so their score this time is not too important. Besides, they have already collected enough items. But Un is still unwilling to accept it, so she splits off from the team and continues acting alone. Outside the dungeon, Lee Jin-tae and his subordinate are watching Hyungu's every move. Both of them are surprised because his skills are far too solid. Moreover, Hyungu looks far too familiar with dungeons. Lee Jin-tae believes he has been entering and exiting dungeons illegally, and even suspects that Hyungu may be a criminal. Although his subordinate has reported that Hyungu has never had a criminal record, from this moment on, Lee Jin-tae fixes his gaze firmly on Hyungu. After fighting, he is starving to death, but there is no food in the dungeon. Who knows what is wrong with young Hyungu's head, but he actually puts the skin separated from those robots into his mouth and chews it. Naturally, the result is that he vomits violently. It is disgusting beyond belief. Suddenly, he senses something approaching. Before he can prepare anything, he takes a punch from the opponent. It turns out On has found her way here. However, she punches right into Hyungu's arm guards, so he is completely unharmed. There is no denying that this girl is both tough and hot-tempered. As soon as she charges in, she throws punches and kicks in a frenzy. If Hyungu did not have the battle assistance skill, he would have gone straight to meet his ancestors by now. Although this skill helps Hyungu dodge easily, he still has no chance to counterattack. Fearing that he cannot hold on much longer, Hyungu makes an extremely dangerous decision. That is, he decides to use additional courage energy together with his battle assistance skill. Un and Hyungu rush at each other like two arrows. Of course, this girl is very strong, but Hyungu possesses the legendary skill battle assistant, and he is just pumped in courage energy as well. So, his punch becomes incredibly powerful. Without even saying it, you can guess the result. Un has her arm broken by Hyungu's punch, and she helplessly collapses to the ground. However, this girl dares to act and dares to accept the consequences. Un quickly admits defeat and voluntarily hands over the bag of items she has collected. But before Hyungu can confiscate it, someone charges in from behind and sends him flying into the wall. The newcomers are a fierce, six-pack girl named Hungrian, also from Red Butterfly, and the bespectacled guy who looked rather delicate at the beginning and suggested teaming up with Hyungu. Hungrian is extremely furious when she sees Un's broken arm, but Hyungu is no less sharp-tongued. While both sides are still exchanging words, the organizers announce the end of the 3-hour assessment. As a result, Hyungu ranks second with 69 items. Un ranks first with 88 items. It turns out that while Hyungu was distracted, the Red Butterfly group gave all the items their team had collected to Un so she could take first place. Hyungu had originally intended to leave, but the six-pack girl Hungrian still wants to teach him another lesson because he injured Un's arm. Hyungu is already frustrated because he failed to take first place. On top of that, even though Un started the trouble first, he fought fairly and won, yet he is still being scolded. So Hyungu decides to teach Hungrian a lesson. Hyungu uses his domination ability to draw out the most terrifying scenes in Hungrian's heart before her eyes. At first, he only intended to teach her a lesson, but in the end, Hungrian faints outright, and the medical team has to step in. Hyungu does not want to get entangled any further, so once again, he chooses to run away as the best plan. Meanwhile, Lee Jin-tae has also witnessed the match between Hyungu and Un. After it ends, instead of choosing to meet first place Un from Red Butterfly first, he asks to meet Hyungu. At this moment, Hyungu is sitting in the waiting room. The domination technique consumed too much energy, leaving him feeling exhausted to death. Lee Jin-tae's assistant, Tae Min-soo, has also come looking for him. Naturally, a talent like Hyungu is someone they cannot overlook. Tae Min-soo promises that the Taezong Guild will help Hyungu bring out the full potential of a hunter. In other words, this is an invitation to join the guild. However, Hyungu does not seem to care much. Instead, he asks whether the Taezong Guild has the ability to help him reach the stars. In the car, Lee Jin-tae is holding an iPad and replaying the solo fight between Hyungu and Un, unable to help sighing in admiration. Tae Min-soo returns to report the situation. He had also already expected that Hyungu would reject the offer, while Un from Red Butterfly would accept. However, Hyungu's mention of the stars makes Lee Jin-tae extremely curious. Although he does not understand what that means, Lee Jin-tae is certain that Hyungu is a special person, and he must pay more attention to him. Roman also comes to pick Hyungu up and take him home. On the way back, she notices the large box that Hyungu is carrying. The girl seems combative, but she is more righteous than expected. Before leaving, she found Hyungu and apologized for her teammates' rude actions. Of course, Hyungu was the one who should have taken first place, so she also gave him the winner's prize. It is a pair of rare gray gloves that increase striking power and defensive strength. Roman mentions Park Ui-soo, the person who bought the phosphorescent crystal last time. This time, Hyungu has also brought back a valuable crystal, and Park Ui-soo has tried every possible way to buy it. This excessive greed makes Hyungu somewhat wary. He also suspects that someone in the shadows truly wants a large amount of phosphorescent crystals, and Park Ui-soo is merely the middleman. In any case, he needs to keep a closer eye on this person. The winner's reward is not only a pair of gloves, but also a check for 50 million. So Hyun-gu and Roman decide to go have a proper meal. When they arrive home, Hyun-gu suddenly senses something very strange. His sharp intuition tells him there is an enemy nearby. Hyun-gu tells Roman to get in the car and wait while he goes behind the house alone. The scene is quite chaotic. Several men in suits have been beaten until they are covered in blood. It is unclear whether they are dead or unconscious. There is also a man still dressed neatly, wearing a hat that covers half his face. This person is none other than Park Ui-soo. It turns out those people were the ones targeting the pile of crystals that Roman helped Hyun-gu sell. As for Park Ui-soo, he dealt with them neatly before they could threaten Roman. Of course, the old man is not kind enough to act as Roman's bodyguard for free. His demand is that Hyun-gu must join the Taesung Guild. Naturally, Hyun-gu has no interest whatsoever in this offer. However, Park Ui-soo has investigated him very thoroughly. The old man knows this young man is someone with considerable ability, so if persuasion does not work, he immediately has to change methods. Park Ui-soo's cane sweeps in like a gust of wind, stabbing straight toward Hyun-gu's face. Of course, with the protagonist's halo, this young man has to dodge it. Using the gloves on a red butterfly had just given him, Hyun-gu immediately returns the favor to Park Ui-soo with a punch to the face for the perfectly legitimate reason of self-defense. He originally thought Park Ui-soo's combat power was only around mid-level. However, Hyun-gu's punch just now successfully enrages the old man. Park Ui-soo is seen taking off his coat and throwing it straight at Hyun-gu. After his vision is obstructed for a few seconds, what happens next leaves Hyun-gu extremely shocked. The cane Park Ui-soo always leans on is actually a sword. He is about to be turned into minced feed. Hyun-gu immediately activates Battle Assistant. It can help him dodge perfectly, but Park Ui-soo's sword strikes are too flexible and too fast, and Hyun-gu has to struggle greatly to avoid being chopped into pig slop. Hyun-gu successfully flips through the air and lands behind Park Ui-soo before he can even rejoice that a chance to counterattack has arrived. The old man's blade slashes toward him again. This speed far exceeds Hyun-gu's imagination. In this life-or-death situation, Hyun-gu is forced to use the dominion power from the stars. But even so, he can only overwhelm Park Ui-soo for a few seconds. In the end, the old man's blade successfully injures Hyun-gu's right wrist. However, Park Ui-soo himself has forgotten that poison blood is one of Hyun-gu's skills. The old man's blade quickly melts because it is stained with the young man's blood. Taking advantage of his opponent's moment of carelessness, Hyun-gu shoves him hard into the wall. But this old man is no pushover either. Punching and kicking, he beats Hyun-gu until he is sent flying far away. Park Ui-soo quickly uses an antidote because he's been touched by Hyun-gu's blood. Meanwhile, Hyun-gu receives an energy buff from the system, so he also quickly recovers to his best condition for battle. However, Park Ui-soo no longer wants to fight pointlessly. After all, he did not come here to fight. He thought using force would make Hyun-gu submit, but this young man is even more stubborn than the old man imagined, and he also cannot dig out any information about where Hyun-gu obtained those phosphorescent crystals. Instead, Hyun-gu says something even more surprising. This young man wants Park Ui-soo to abandon Taesung and work under him. In Park Ui-soo's eyes, Hyun-gu is merely an up-and-coming young man with mediocre ability. So, of course, he only thinks the proposal Hyun-gu has just uttered is nothing but absurd nonsense. But Park Ui-soo knows how to work, has influence, and is also a very powerful ability user. Hyun-gu has taken notice of these things and does not want to waste the chance to recruit such an expert under him. However, this young man's recruitment method is somewhat too foul-mouthed. Just as Park Ui-soo is about to leave, Hyun-gu begins using his words to belittle the Taesung Guild. He also says that Lee Jin-tae and the Taesung Guild abilities are nothing but media-hype publicity stunts. At first, Park Ui-soo does not intend to take it seriously. The old man thinks Hyun-gu is either a fool who does not know his own limits, or someone far too ambitious and arrogant despite having no great ability. But Hyun-gu's mouth keeps running further and further. This young man continues mocking him, saying that Park Ui-soo's sword, now stained with poison blood, is nothing more than a broken blade. Perhaps because he is too irritated, Park Ui-soo draws his sword and slashes through the air, The wall behind Hyungu instantly shatters. Although this is already an incredibly terrifying power, according to the old man, the Taezong Guild has countless people stronger than this, and Lee Jin-tae is the strongest. One would think this threatening display would shut Hyungu's mouth, but this young man is determined to prove that he will become even stronger than Lee. Vintai. It took him half a year after becoming a hunter to climb to level 20, and even that required Taesong's help. Meanwhile, Hyungu is confident that even without any guild backing him, he can reach that level within 2 weeks. As if making a bet, Hyungu demands that Park Uisu come work for him if he can truly break through level 20 within 2 weeks. After Park Uisu leaves, Hyungu goes to hell and begins leveling up. He throws himself into fighting goblins like a madman and quickly rises to level 15. Even so, Hyungu's hand is also bitten by a goblin and badly injured. While he is bandaging the wound, Renian appears from nowhere like a ghost. The first thing the little brat does is stick her proboscis into Hyungu's arm and suck his blood greedily. Hyungu is too lazy to bother with her. He looks at the piled-up goblin corpses and begins to think again. Hyungu is thinking about the first red-capped goblin he met when he came to this hell. It is the strongest goblin, and he is certain it is not among the pile of goblins he just dealt with. There, and speak of the devil, and he appears. This red-capped goblin appeared out of nowhere. Its right arm, which had been soaked in poison blood, had been cut off, and was now replaced by a huge iron hook. The monster was furious when it saw the pile of corpses of its own kind. Hyungu did not want to waste too much time either. He and the monster quickly charged at each other to begin the battle. You would think he would successfully level up again after taking down this monster. But if it were that easy, the story would be a lot less interesting. And so Hyungu was beaten to death by this monster after surviving in hell for 12 days. The system also generated a new mission for Hyungu. He had to defeat that goblin. Hyungu had just sat up, still calculating in his head how to set a trap for the goblin and kill it. Suddenly, something behind him sliced through the air toward him. As a result, Hyungu died again barely over a minute after reviving. After dying for the 6th time, Hyungu truly lost his patience. Every time he revived, this damned thing chased him down and insisted on finishing him off. He could not keep running forever, so Hyungu turned back and threw a punch with all his might. Well, the result was still death. The gap in ability was too great, so Hyungu began thinking about escaping. And once he decided to run, he really did run. For many days after that, the red-capped goblin named Kutsun could no longer find Hyungu anywhere in the ruined city. At the same time, another goblin came to Kutsun to report that the water source in the goblin village had been poisoned and that many villagers were now on the brink of death. Kutsun returned, and with just a brief look at the situation, it knew this was the work of Hyungu's poison blood. Its eyes turned red with rage. It could not understand how Hyungu had managed to find the place where its kin lived. Then another goblin carried a child over to Kutsun. It turned out this was its child, and the child seemed to have been poisoned by the water as well. Kutsun shed tears, swearing that it would kill Hyungu. But the other goblins stopped it because they all knew Hyungu could revive no matter how many times he was killed. They advised Kutsun to let go of its hatred and help the villagers move instead. Kutsun raised its blade toward the sky. The other goblins also noticed that it seemed to be drawing power from the Whispering Star. Kutsun had clearly resolved to fight Hyungu in a battle to the death. A while later, the goblins also discovered the corpse of another scout goblin some distance from the village. But Kutsun keenly realized that it was a trap Hyungu had set to lure the goblins away. Therefore, it ordered its kin to return and protect the village, while it alone would hunt Hyungu. Hyungu was not going to keep hiding forever either. Although no one knew what this young man had planned, the way he appeared boldly in front of Kutsun made it seem like a huge fight was about to break out. But this time, Hyungu and Kutsun did not immediately charge in and fight like before. It seemed Kutsun cared deeply about its kin, and Hyungu had taken advantage of that. He admitted that he was the one who poisoned the villagers, and that he himself would never die. That meant Hyungu could kill every last one of Kutsun's kin. But Kutsun had no way to restrain Hyungu, who knew what Kutsun was feeling at that moment, but actually threw the blade in its hand to the ground. Kutsun agreed to die, but hoped Hyungu would keep his promise and not touch its innocent kin. Hyungu naturally agreed without hesitation. As he bent down to pick up Kutsun's blade, it kicked him so hard it caved in his head. So Kutsun had only been pretending all along. Do goblins lie just like humans? Hyun-gu was sent flying and sprawled across the ground. Kutsun rushed over like a whirlwind, pinned Hyun-gu down, and began venting all its rage on him. It used its blade to slash Hyun-gu again and again. But that was exactly in line with this young man's calculations. When Hyun-gu's vitality dropped below 10%, the system automatically activated regeneration mode and restored him to his best condition. After regenerating, Hyun-gu quickly counterattacked. He grabbed Kutsun by the throat, then slammed it with a heaven-shaking blow. For some reason, whenever these guys fight, they just have to punch the opponent into a wall, don't they? In short, after regenerating, Hyun-gu was as strong as an ox. The course of the battle also began to change. Kutsun could not understand why this brat, whom it had just hacked to pieces, was now so ridiculously tough. Meanwhile, Hyun-gu grew more fired up the longer he fought, unleashing a continuous barrage of punches and kicks. Kutsun was beaten down by him until it collapsed. Hyun-gu was not only as strong as a bull, but his mouth was also sharp. Before finishing off his opponent, he did not forget to explain why the situation had turned out this way. It turned out that the previous times, Kutsun had finished him off quickly with a single strike. But this time, it wanted to torture Hyun-gu and grew complacent, thinking it could kill him at any moment. That was why Hyun-gu had enough time to recover his energy and turn the tables. Kutsun originally wanted to rush forward and cut off Hyun-gu's head like every other time. But at some point, arrows coated in Hyun-gu's poison blood had pierced 2 deep holes into its flank. Knowing that it could not win this time, Kutsun began changing its tone and pleading with Hyun-gu, even though it hated humanity to the core. But Hyun-gu did not soften. Although it seemed a bit cold-blooded on the battlefield, sparing an enemy is the same as killing yourself. And so, with one final kick, Hyun-gu sent Kutsun's head flying, officially ending the long, drawn-out battle between the two of them. After dealing with Kutsun, Hyun-gu stood there in a daze for a long while, and it was unclear what he was feeling. However, the system notifications quickly pulled him out of his wandering thoughts. For completing the mission to kill Kutsun, Hyun-gu not only received countless rewards, but also leveled up 3 times in a row. Hyun-gu began searching Kutsun's body, because he did not understand what made this goblin so different from its kin and why it was so tough. Hyun-gu found a piece of cloth covered in crooked writing that he could not read. Suddenly, the writing on the cloth began to move. It twisted and formed into a sphere floating in midair. Rays of light from the sphere pierced straight through Hyun-gu's palm. It did not hurt, but afterward, a mark appeared on his hand. It was just like last time when Renian found that stone. Before the battle, Kutsun had borrowed power from the Shattered Star, and now Hyun-gu was the one absorbing the fragment from this star. At the same time, the young man also learned a new skill called Authority. The mission was complete, and there were still 21 days until the next mission, so Hyun-gu returned to the real world. Roman was still sound asleep at that moment. She really did look much prettier without her glasses, didn't she? Startled by his voice, Roman woke up. She seemed a little surprised to see Hyun-gu return, and there also seemed to be a bit of disappointment mixed in. Roman made the excuse that she needed to go buy groceries to cook, but Hyun-gu also felt that her mood did not seem very good. 2 days ago, Park Ui-soo had come to Hyun-gu not to buy phosphorescent crystals, but to discuss something she did not know about. Combined with the times Hyun-gu kept appearing and disappearing without a word of explanation, Roman's emotions finally exploded. Hyun-gu, of course, also understood why she was so angry. Roman was a good girl. She had stayed by his side since he had nothing, and even now, she had never once thought of hurting him. Therefore, Hyun-gu no longer wanted to gloss things over. The two of them calmly sat down, and Hyun-gu truly told his girlfriend everything. Roman was not an unreasonable person either, so after learning the whole truth, her mood naturally eased. But after not seeing her boyfriend for so long, how could just talking be enough? It must be admitted once again that Roman really is pretty when she takes off her glasses. As for what happened after that, everyone can imagine it for themselves. Returning to the main issue, before Hyun-gu even knew where to find Park Ui-soo, the old man showed up on his own. He also seemed surprised that Hyun-gu had leveled up so quickly, so he no longer forced him to join Taezong. Hyun-gu also could not force the old man to work under him. So the two of them quickly returned to the familiar topic, trading phosphorescent crystals. Because of their rarity, Park Uisu agreed to raise the crystal price by 15%. But Hyun-gu was rather arrogant and wanted to double it. Naturally, the old man did not want to take a loss. So this bidding match seemed like it would still be quite tense. Hyun-gu took out a whole chunk of phosphorescent crystal, an extremely large one. But no matter how valuable it was, Park Uisu could not easily agree to doubling the price. However, although the transaction could not proceed smoothly at the initial price, Hyun-gu gave the old man a huge surprise. It was a ring called the Faith of Yours. This item was legendary grade and doubled the owner's senses. Giving the old man this ring was both to make the transaction easier and to prove that Hyun-gu's resources were much better than Lee Jin-tae's. Of course, Park Uisu could tell with just one glance that this was a good item. Moreover, he also noticed that this ring was one of a pair. However, when asked about the other ring, Hyun-gu seemed to know nothing at all. So for the time being, the old man agreed to buy that phosphorescent crystal chunk at double the price, exactly as Hyun-gu wanted, and even helped him handle the matter of preventing the tax authorities from discovering this black market transaction. But Hyun-gu was no pushover either. Not only did this young man know the whereabouts of the other ring, he was even holding it in his hand. The other ring was called the Obedience of Eckenharris. It could track the location of the owner of the Faith of Yours, while temporarily reducing the owner's abilities by 50%. While he was at it, Hyun-gu even borrowed Park Uisu's car to take Roman out on a date. The problem was that this young man did not even have a driver's license. In the end, Roman was the one driving the whole way. He might not know how to drive, but his punching and kicking skills were at a decent level. Hyun-gu and Park Uisu's relationship had made tremendous progress. They were even going boxing together now. However, Park Uisu still did not seem to have given up on his ambition of inviting Hyun-gu into Taesong. Even while fighting, he did not forget to enthusiastically promote all the benefits Hyun-gu could receive by joining the guild. Hyun-gu, meanwhile, maintained the same attitude as always. He would fight when it was time to fight, but he would still keep refusing to join. Hyun-gu's fighting skills still had not surpassed Park Uisu's. But the more the old man fought, the more interested he became in this young man's endurance. Hyun-gu was beaten like a punching bag, but as soon as his energy dropped below 10%, regeneration mode immediately activated. The arm Park Uisu had just broken was also set and healed right away. In just 2 weeks, Hyun-gu had become much stronger, and he could even recover on his own, so Park Uisu was extremely interested. But Hyun-gu had asked the old man to come here today, of course, not just to box or have a heart-to-heart. He asked Park Uisu about the stars. However, the old man did not really know much either. This concept seemed to be known only to top-ranking experts like Lee Jin-tae. Hyun-gu also did not forget to remind him that if he found out anything, he should look into it more carefully for him. Then, suddenly, Park Uisu asked Hyun-gu whether he wanted to enter Hell one more time. Hyun-gu remained vague about this proposal. However, Park Uisu truly was experienced and thoughtful. Although even he did not know where Hyun-gu was training to improve at such a miraculous speed. In this world, every time hunters entered or exited a dungeon, it was recorded. If Hyun-gu did not frequently enter and exit dungeons, then in the eyes of others, he would be nothing more than a hunter with no real combat experience. Once he said it, Park Uisu handled all the procedures for Hyun-gu. As for Hyun-gu, he had to go to the dungeon at Clearstream Mountain to train. While he was still lost in thought, a girl appeared from who knew where, holding a gong and banging it noisily to gather the ability users registered for the dungeon. It turned out that this girl was an inspector from Hoenn Mama, a fairly well-known guild. This time, aside from Hyun-gu, 4 other hunters were also entering the dungeon, and the inspector was there to supervise them and prevent fights from breaking out. Clearstream Dungeon was not a mobile dungeon, had no changes, and was only 1 star, so it was extremely easy. Overall, everything was fine, except that this female inspector reeked of alcohol because she had gotten dead drunk yesterday. All 5 new hunters took turns, introducing themselves. Among the 5, one tall guy had already reached 2 stars. When it was Hyun-gu's turn to introduce himself, the female inspector looked unusually wary. He felt a little nervous, because to be honest, illegally selling phosphorescent crystals was already enough to make him uneasy. but it turned out she was just too drunk and had mistaken Hyungu for an old classmate. When asked about what weapon he had prepared for entering the dungeon, Hyungu pulled out a wooden stick. This accidentally angered that tall, two-star hunter. Perhaps he found Hyungu's careless attitude irritating and also wanted to show off a little, so he pulled out his whole bag of weapons. Just as he picked up a large blade and tried to intimidate Hyungu a bit, the female inspector effortlessly threw him to the ground. The blade in his hand was also slammed into the ground by her, right beside his face. Needless to say, this guy was so scared he nearly wet himself and hurriedly apologized over and over. After watching the show for a while, Hyungu also silently evaluated this girl. Although her ability probably could not match Park Ui-su's, she was still quite strong. As for exactly how strong, he would have to test her to find out. While Hyungu was still lost in thought, behind him, an extremely terrifying face emerged from the ground. Looking closely, it was a goblin. As for whether it had anything to do with that goblin named Kutsun, we would only find out later. The 5 hunters were led into the dungeon by the female inspector. As soon as they stepped through, the iron gate immediately closed, and there were even soldiers standing guard outside. The inside was extremely gloomy. This dungeon took the form of a forest, and goblins lurked everywhere within it. The condition for clearing this dungeon was to find the Triumph Stone hidden inside the goblin cave. After finishing the basic briefing, the female inspector stepped back to observe. The hunters would have to attack the dungeon themselves. The first problem appeared very quickly. That 2-star hunter named Park Seol-moon had already started acting like a know-it-all. He taught everyone how to camouflage themselves by plucking grass and rubbing it on their bodies. He even repeatedly reminded them to watch out for attacks to the head. Hyungu immediately refuted this idea, but Park Seol-moon stubbornly argued back, because this was a method he had learned from a famous hunter. According to Hyungu's explanation, goblins had a sharp sense of smell, so plucking grass and rubbing it on one's body would be useless. Also, since goblins were small, the area that needed the most attention was the ankles, not the head. The female inspector strongly agreed with Hyungu's opinion. However, her agreement also came with suspicion, because she felt his knowledge was like experience accumulated from catching goblins many times. Hyungu, of course, denied it vehemently, but he could not completely extinguish the suspicion in the female inspector's heart. Park Seol-moon also wanted to take this chance to throw a few barbs at him. But before they could even start arguing back and forth, a short goblin rushed over like a gust of wind. Everyone panicked and fell into a passive state. Only Hyungu remained extremely calm, raising his foot and kicking it straight in the head. At this sight, both Park Seol-moon and the other 3 hunters were so shocked their jaws dropped. Seeing that Hyungu was not exactly friendly, the female inspector took the initiative to ease the tension and asked the whole group to continue their journey to attack the goblins in the dungeon. The deeper they went, the more goblins appeared. Each hunter had their own weapon, and their movements were quite agile. Many goblins were dealt with. The inspector, standing to the side and watching, also felt relieved because everyone was doing very well. However, with her sharp intuition, she sensed that the atmosphere inside the dungeon was a little strange. The goblins seemed more frightened than usual. There was no way they were scared of the new hunters. She wondered whether there might be something else even more terrifying in the dungeon today. A piercing scream rang out, and the female inspector immediately rushed over to check the scene. What lay before her was an extremely horrific sight. Countless goblin corpses in miserable condition were scattered all over the ground. There were also goblins that had been killed and then tied tightly to pillars. Realizing the danger, the inspector immediately ordered all the new hunters to gather around her. But Kang Hyungu had vanished somewhere by then. Hidden behind layers of dense trees was an extremely vicious face. It was none other than the red-capped goblin Kutsun, whom Hyungu had killed not long ago. Going back 1 hour, the hunters were still enthusiastically slaughtering goblins. Hyungu felt that this training dungeon was far too easy. The others were fighting with no strategy at all, and the female inspector was being far too careless. So, while she was not paying attention, Hyungu quickly slipped away elsewhere. Hyungu went to an open area to test the skill he had just received. Authority was the skill Hyungu had obtained after dealing with Kutsun. With this skill in hand, as long as the opponent's corpse was not too badly damaged, he could revive it and command it as he pleased. That was why Kutsun was still standing intact in front of Hyungu like this. After summoning Kutsun, the first task Hyungu gave it was to deal with all the remaining goblins. Kutsun, of course, did not want to slaughter its own kind. At first, it still resisted, but Hyungu threatened that if it did not obey, he would wipe out its entire tribe back in hell as well. Just then, a rather dumb-looking goblin appeared. After struggling with itself for a while, Kutsun still had to make its decision. Because he had obtained the authority skill from Kutsun, Hyungu could roughly sense its emotions. And when Kutsun faced that dim-witted-looking goblin, it was extremely irritated. It looked crude, could not speak, and did not even have a proper weapon. Kutsun acted with extreme brutality, even tearing that goblin's body apart. Hyungu also understood that because the thing was too pathetic, Kutsun did not want to acknowledge it as one of its kind at all. No matter how many goblins came, Kutsun wiped them all out. That was why the female inspector later saw such a scene. Returning to the present, the group was still searching for Hyungu. While the female inspector was extremely worried, Hyungu suddenly appeared again. And of course, this young man still pretended to be foolish, as if nothing had happened. Right after that, the sharp-eyed Park Seol-moon spotted the Triumph Stone in the distance. But before the female inspector could lead everyone over, that cowardly big guy had already dashed ahead first. From the inspector's expression, he had vaguely guessed that something extremely terrible had just happened, so he wanted to run ahead quickly. However, before his hand could touch the Triumph Stone, Kutsun appeared. Park Seol-moon fell flat onto the ground. With the situation urgent, the inspector had to rush over at once to stop Kutsun from taking his life. And so, the battle between a level 20 goblin and a high-level hunter from one of Korea's top 3 guilds broke out. Unexpectedly, this entire scene had actually been arranged by Hyungu to test just how capable the female inspector really was. Come to think of it, this guy looked dull and weak as a leaf in the beginning. Now that he had become much tougher, why did he also seem so sinister? The battle between Kutsun and the female inspector named No Haun was extremely intense. Hyungu quietly stood to the side and observed. The reason was that the authority skill Hyungu had just obtained could not control someone with a higher level. Kutsun was currently still higher level than him, but if Hyungu died, Kutsun would also die, and with that, its tribe would be destroyed as well. Therefore, Kutsun had to protect Hyungu while also obeying him. Perhaps because of this, it had vented its anger on those other goblins so brutally. While they were closing in on each other, Kutsun suddenly changed direction and charged toward the new hunters. No Haun also grew extremely tense and flew after it. But Kutsun suddenly braked hard and leapt backward. No Haun, who had been rushing forward, could not stop in time and took a slash from it directly. Blood sprayed everywhere. She clearly realized how absurd it was for a high-level goblin equipped with refined weapons, and even possessing intelligence like this, to appear in a 1-star dungeon. Utterly furious, No Haun was forced to use her personal skill to overpower her opponent. Her skill was called Acceleration. It allowed the user's energy to double for a certain period of time, making her attacks extremely threatening. No Haun suddenly disappeared, leaving both Kutsun and Hyungu greatly shocked. He immediately ordered Kutsun to leave its position. Kutsun ran very fast, but No Haun was even faster. She suddenly appeared beside Kutsun. Her 2 short swords coldly slashed down. A deep X-shaped wound appeared on Kutsun's chest. Once again, No Haun disappeared, then abruptly appeared above Kutsun's head. Just as the blade was about to cut down, Kutsun pulled the pin from a tear gas grenade in its pouch. An explosion occurred, and the female inspector was blasted away. When the smoke completely dispersed, Kutsun had its blade pressed against Park Seol-moon's neck. Taking a hostage had indeed worked. No Haun fell into a difficult situation. If she now chose to put down her weapons to save Park Seol-moon and let Kutsun escape, the consequences would be extremely unpredictable. No Haun still gripped the 2 knives tightly in her hands. She had intended to sacrifice Park Seol-moon in order to capture Kutsun no matter what. But Hyungu naturally had to step in and ruin things. From behind, this young man used his wooden stick to hit a rock like a baseball straight toward Kutsun. It immediately let go of Park Seol-moon. No Haun was so frightened that she froze. She demanded that Hyungu immediately retreat. But since this guy was the mastermind behind everything, of course he was not afraid and had no reason to obey that order. The more Hyungu thought about it, the more disappointed he felt in No Haun's abilities. She had been entangled with Kutsun for far too long, and Kutsun's stamina had already dropped greatly by now. If it had been the same Kutsun that had beaten Hyungu half to death in hell, No-Hone would have been long dead by now. And Hyungu had also ordered Kutsun not to kill anyone. But this goblin did not seem very willing to obey him yet. So Hyungu also did not want to push things any further. Hyungu picked up a stone from the ground and struck it straight toward Kutsun. With this lunatic opening the fight, No-Hone also charged forward and fought with extreme ferocity. Park Seol-moon had almost been sacrificed as stepping stone material just now, so she was even more determined to capture Kutsun and atone for it. Hyungu, holding his wooden stick in hand, also rushed in to join the battle. On one hand, he was still fighting Kutsun head-on, but on the other, he secretly signaled for it to dodge No-Hone's attacks. Thanks to that, although Kutsun still took a bit of a beating, at least its wounds were not fatal. It even had enough strength left to kick No-Hone painfully once more. As for Hyungu, he was still acting with extreme dedication, occasionally rushing up to slash a few times as if he were truly fighting Kutsun. The air was filled with the ringing clashes of blades. No-Hone had nearly used all the strength she had to fight Kutsun, but she still could not gain the upper hand. While retreating, Kutsun accidentally stepped on Park Seol-moon, who was lying unconscious and sprawled out there. It suddenly came up with a plan. Park Seol-moon's entire fat body was lifted up by Kutsun, then kicked straight toward No-Hone. This was literally crushing someone with flesh. She fell backward and could not get up. Kutsun now even emitted killing intent, planning to finish off No-Hone as well, but Hyungu ordered it to stop. Although it was not very willing, Kutsun still had to obey. It detonated several smoke bombs to limit everyone's vision, then vanished without leaving a trace. Although No-Hone was extremely angry, there was nothing more she could do. The dungeon expedition ended here. After Kutsun slipped away, No-Hone noticed the bloodstains left on the ground and quickly followed them. The dungeon had ended safely, but No-Hone could not accept that a terrifying monster like Kutsun had appeared in a one-star dungeon. Although she reported it forcefully, the handling department could not help because, judging from the actual situation, there were no signs that the dungeon had been upgraded, and there were no other supervisors to testify that Kutsun had appeared. No-Hone sat dazedly in her chair, so much so that she did not even notice when Hyungu appeared beside her. This young man had come to ask around about Kutsun's whereabouts, and the female inspector, of course, had no suspicions and told him everything. When she followed the trail to the place, what she found was the corpse of a goblin that had been chopped to pieces, its face unrecognizable. But based on its appearance, it was probably indeed Kutsun, so she only kept its red cap as evidence for further investigation. Hyungu had one more small question. Could he directly go to a 2-star dungeon or not? No-Hone had clearly seen Hyungu's strength after this incident. She could not help but admit that the person standing in front of her was very skilled. After asking around for a while, No-Hone learned that Hyungu was not an experienced hunter and did not belong to any guild yet. Therefore, since opportunity favors the quick, she also quickly tried to recruit Hyungu into her Hoenn Mama guild. Compared to Taezong, the benefits of joining the guild were not lacking at all. However, Hyungu had always maintained the same mindset. He felt that he still did very well attacking dungeons alone. Moreover, dividing the spoils after the dungeon ended was too complicated. So what Hyungu cared about most right now was only the issue of leveling up after the Clear Stream Mountain dungeon. Elsewhere at the Research Institute, an employee was hurriedly carrying an advancement evaluation form to meet his director. Before he could say more than a few words, the female director threw a coffee cup straight at his face. Working for capitalists for a pittance really was far too miserable. It seemed that Kang Hyungu's abilities were gradually drawing more and more attention. Hoenn Mama Guild even made an unreasonable request, saying that if the results regarding the special individual were revealed before the official announcement, they would donate 100 million to the Research Institute. However, Director Jo Won-kyung ignored this proposal. Kang Hyungu was an unknown variable, and she absolutely had to clarify this question. Therefore, a large number of employees were immediately mobilized to investigate Hyungu, including his bloodline hometown, education, residence, and recent actions. In this world, aside from the level that was commonly mentioned, there was also another concept known as grade. Level was mainly restricted by this grade. Once a level reached the maximum limit set by the grade, there was no way to increase it further. Hyun-gu's previous level limit was 20, and he had been unable to raise it any further until he met Roman. She was still a graduate researcher at the Research Institute at the time, and she had come to draw Hyun-gu's blood in order to conduct experimental research on increasing grade. In truth, increasing grade still faced many difficulties, but if one relied on mana leakage over a long period of time, there was still a high chance of increasing one's grade. Returning to the present, Hyun-gu had now begun entering hell again. His grade increase could only be carried out here. There were still 9 more days until the new mission. While waiting, Hyun-gu once again began using his crafting energy to make a few things. The first was a bloody dagger of legendary grade. There was also a crystal stone that could be combined during crafting to produce other legendary grade finished products. The relationship between Hyun-gu and Kutsun had now improved a great deal. At the very least, this goblin had learned to listen to orders. So when Hyun-gu demanded that it hand over half of its rare grade equipment so he could craft new gear, Kutsun still had no choice but to obediently comply. 9 days later, Hyun-gu had another new toy. This piece of equipment was called the left hand of Iaseth, and its main function was defense. With both a new gauntlet and a new dagger, Hyun-gu tested their power a little. The sturdy wall he had repaired before was sliced apart like tofu after just a few sword strokes. This result made Hyun-gu quite satisfied. Although he had shut himself in hell these past few days, Hyun-gu still had not found a way to increase his grade. So he had no choice but to strengthen the skills he had already learned while also equipping himself with some better items. Even Kutsun was exploited for labor. Hyun-gu made it draw an entire map of the surrounding terrain so it would be easier to move during battle. Hyun-gu's new mission had arrived. It was to survive for 48 hours while being hunted by an opponent. Overall, it was quite similar to the first mission he received when he had just arrived in hell, but something unexpected occurred. The gluttonous star Iagalem had been observing Hyun-gu for the past few days, and now it wanted to challenge him. If he accepted the challenge, the mission's difficulty would increase, and the reward would increase as well. Recently, Hyun-gu had tried every method, but still had not been able to find the exact way to increase his grade. So, faced with this opportunity, he had no choice but to agree. However, after he agreed, the system issued another notification. All the stars were also watching Hyun-gu. Taking on a challenge while having such a large live stream audience watching was quite a lot of pressure, wasn't it? Now he did not simply have to survive 48 hours of pursuit. A curse had also been created. That curse was delicious. There was no need to imagine how Hyun-gu felt right now. Even I could not understand what kind of bizarre curse would be called delicious. He originally did not quite understand it, but Roman and Kutsun, who were standing behind him, suddenly behaved very strangely. Both of them were staring at Hyun-gu with ravenous eyes, their mouths already drooling all over. It turned out that the curse placed on Hyun-gu caused his entire body to give off an incredibly stimulating aroma. Every member of Iagalem's demon tribe was as ravenously hungry as a monster. They even ate one another. Since he had suddenly turned into a delicious, juicy piece of bait, Hyun-gu would definitely be pursued by those monsters far more fiercely. The first opponent soon smashed through the door and rushed in. Hyun-gu had already taken out his new gauntlet and short sword, ready to fight. But when the door was broken down, what rushed in was a swarm of mosquitoes. They frantically sucked Hyun-gu's blood, but every single one of them met the same result, being poisoned to death. According to Roman, mosquitoes were the lowest class within Iagalem's demon tribe. Although they were not especially threatening, they had already discovered Hyun-gu's location. That meant the remaining monsters would soon find this place as well. The one who struck first was the strong one, but for Hyun-gu at this moment, the best plan was to tuck his tail and run. The moment he stepped out of the shelter, a new opponent arrived again. This time it was not mosquitoes, but incredibly a flock of birds. Every single one of them was plump and round, with eyes rolled back in extreme craving. Hyun-gu could only run until he was nearly out of breath, and even Kutsun was dragged along to flee with him. Under the crimson moon, one person and one goblin, both possessing powerful abilities, were somehow forced to run for their lives while being pursued by a flock of birds and a swarm of mosquitoes. Hyun-gu was unbelievably annoyed. Kutsun's tribe had been a little crowded lately, so there was nowhere to hide either. Therefore, the only option was to fight. However, this Ayagalem guy really played dirty. What Hyunwoo wanted was a powerful monster he could fight one-on-one, not that damn swarm of mosquitoes and birds. And just as he wished, while fleeing, Hyunwoo and Kutsun jumped from the bridge down to the ground. Below them, a pack of monsters was already waiting. I did not even know how to describe what these things looked like. They looked like venom, but much uglier. Their faces had no eyes or noses, only enormous mouths full of razor-sharp teeth. Still, compared to those birds and mosquitoes, Hyunwoo liked these guys a lot more. Before they could even attack, he gripped his sword and enthusiastically charged in first. The problem was that these things were even stronger than he had imagined. Before the sword in his hand could land a single strike, Hyunwoo was grabbed and pinned by one of the fiends. It opened its huge, tooth-filled mouth wide and bit straight down at Hyunwoo's head. And everyone already knows how that turned out. It was still the familiar notification the system had sent Hyunwoo for the umpteenth time. You have died. The scene became more chaotic than ever. Under the tearing claws of the Ayagalem creatures, who knew how many times Hyunwoo died. But every time he revived, the result was not any better. Whenever he could not win, this young man chose to run. This time was no exception. Hyunwoo ran as if dogs were chasing him. And behind him, birds, mosquitoes, and that whole pack of defective venoms were still pursuing him extremely closely. While he was fleeing, a voice suddenly seemed to appear in Hyunwoo's mind, guiding him. Following the voice's words, he unconsciously turned into the alley on his right. Hyunwoo felt like he had run himself insane, which was why this voice had appeared in his head. After turning right once more, the monsters really were left behind. However, before one calamity had even passed, the next had already arrived. In the rubble at the end of the road, Hyunwoo saw a pair of huge eyes glowing bright red. Before he could react, that enormous creature broke through the reinforced concrete and rose up. Good lord, it turned out to be a super gigantic spider. Anyone afraid of spiders like me would probably die of a heart attack if they saw this for real. The voice in Hyunwoo's head rang out once again, telling him to duck. A huge stream of silk shot out from the spider's abdomen. The young man was lucky enough to dodge it, while the defective venoms were all caught in the web and immobilized. In one sweep, this fiend was already enormous and ferocious enough, yet its level was as high as 87. Hyunwoo's ears were already ringing. This was way too terrifying. While he was still wondering who had set up this monstrous game, he heard that voice echoing in his mind again. It turned out that the voice that had been guiding Hyunwoo all this time was the Whispering Star, Monstrin. She had added fuel to the fire in the trial, making Hyunwoo suffer badly and run for his life like this. The fact that Monstrin caused trouble and then helped Hyunwoo was enough to show that she had her own objective. And her objective was to make him join her tribe. As mentioned before, Monstrin had the ability to entice all-powerful beings with her voice and allure. And right now, Hyunwoo was falling into exactly that state. According to Monstrin's temptation, he did not need to pay any price except to love her, worship her, and become infatuated with her in order to gain power. It was an irresistible temptation, making Hyunwoo feel as if he were sinking into a swamp. However, at the decisive moment, the male lead was still the male lead. Ordinary trials like this had to be overcome. Hyunwoo finally managed to shut out that temptation. He flatly rejected Monstrin on the grounds that he already had a girlfriend at home. This young man truly deserves a perfect 10. Monstrin fell into contemplation after Hyunwoo's blunt refusal. Still, being able to stay clear-headed before a girl as beautiful as a goddess like this really makes me admire him. Because he had rejected her, Hyunwoo naturally had to rely on himself to overcome the trial. Even so, this level 87 spider spirit was not something he could overcome just because he said he would. When Hyunwoo regained his senses, several baby spiders had appeared from who knew where and were crawling up his arms, and there were even more in front of him. The dense swarm of baby spiders rushed over and clung tightly to Hyunwoo's whole body, making him feel disgusted. I feel disgusted too. When Hyunwoo saw the level 87 spider spirit charging toward him, he thought he would have to die yet again. Who knew where Cussin and Renian had been hiding all this time? But only now did they appear on screen. The two climbed up into an abandoned structure, where there was a chaotic mess of creatures wrapped in spider silk like mummified corpses. Renian stopped in front of a silk cocoon and told Cussin to open it. Inside was Hyun-woo, lying there in a pharaoh-like pose. That spider spirit had not torn this young man apart, but had merely wrapped him tightly in silk. Fortunately, Hyun-woo had only fainted and had not suffocated to death. Cussin pulled him up while he was unconscious. Renian called out to him a few times, but Hyun-woo still did not wake up. Since a gentle method did not work, she tried a forceful one. This violent little girl rammed straight into Hyun-woo's stomach. There is no need to discuss how effective this method was. Just looking at how the young man woke up immediately made it obvious. After waking up with a splitting headache, Hyun-woo walked back and forth a little to loosen his muscles. As soon as he pulled aside a layer of spiderweb, the corpse of an enormous goblin appeared before his eyes. Its body was also covered with many baby spiders and spider silk. Hyun-woo was bewildered by this thing's appearance, while Cussin was more curious about the tool on his left hand. Hearing that, Hyun-woo also instinctively looked down at his own hand. The armor on his left hand had completely changed. It looked as if it had been upgraded, and it even had 6 fingers. Hyun-woo remembered what Monstrin had said before the spider spirit killed him. She had said she would help him complete this toy, so this upgrade must have been her handiwork. Hyun-woo opened his inventory and took out the monocle he had picked up from the dried skeleton last time. By pouring a bit of mana into it and looking through the lens, he could analyze tools in detail. Hyun-woo carefully observed the new glove. All of its defensive stats had increased. There was one more thing. Its old grade had been legend, but now it had become masterpiece. In other words, there were tools of an even higher grade than legendary, and he currently possessed one of them. Just thinking about that was already exciting enough. Hyun-woo wanted to test the power of this thing right away. Outside the rubble, the whole pack of defective venoms was still disoriented. Since these guys had no eyes, they could only rely on scent to grope their way toward food. Following the smell, the monsters entered a large sewer pipe one after another. But then something very strange suddenly happened. First, one defective venom was bitten by a mosquito. At this point, something already felt wrong, because they were of the same kind and basically should not have been attacking each other. After that, the monsters began lunging at each other and tearing one another apart even more violently. And standing in the darkness was a very familiar figure. It was clearly Hyun-woo. It turned out he had used his new glove and his authority skill to manipulate the mosquitoes and spiders. It truly was fighting poison with poison. The scene once again became chaotic. The bulky monsters frantically bit and tore at each other. Hyun-woo stood to the side and watched with immense satisfaction. His left hand was still busy with the new glove, while his right hand ignored the mosquitoes sucking his blood until it became swollen. It turned out that sometime before this trial occurred, Hyun-woo had done quite a bit of research and experimentation with his authority skill. Its essence was that after finishing off an opponent, he could revive them and command them, just as Hyun-woo was manipulating Cussin now. Although this skill could not be applied to every target, small creatures like mosquitoes were extremely easy. The mosquitoes that sucked Hyun-woo's blood would all die because of poison blood, but then they would all be revived thanks to his authority. After that, they not only obeyed his orders, but also gained poison resistance and greater vitality. They were not especially powerful, but that was already enough for Hyun-woo to use them against the bulky monsters outside. Cussin and Hyun-woo chose a fairly safe base with many interconnected exits. That way, they could not be isolated. The mosquitoes were still constantly sucking his blood and continuing to perform their mission well. If they let those monsters keep fighting among themselves like this, surviving the 48 hours was entirely possible. But something unexpected happened. Hyun-woo suddenly felt the world go dark and collapsed to the ground. Cussin immediately ran over to support him. These two really were showing affection now. Perhaps it was because he had lost too much blood that Hyun-woo became dizzy. If this continued, he definitely would not be able to last 48 hours. The young man immediately had to rack his brain and think of another way. Cussin wanted to help Hyun-woo leave, but from behind them came a series of sounds. Something was using a sword to cut through all the spider silk Hyun-woo had spread across the entrance to block it. Sans signe danger approching. He immediately ordered Kusin to leave, then took out his sword and prepared to meet the enemy. However, the thing hidden in the darkness gradually revealed itself. Many pairs of hungry, glowing green eyes. Hyun-woo became extremely tense. The thing also slowly stepped out. It was a human wearing military clothing. Before he could relax, Hyun-woo saw the creature's face clearly. It turned out they really were human, but all of them had already become zombies. And it was not just one of them, but a whole crowd. The leading zombie ordered them to capture Hyun-woo. Its subordinates immediately received the order and shot forward like arrows. Hyun-woo tied his blood-soaked sword to several strands of spider silk, then hurled it straight into a zombie's head. This thing had been upgraded, so it now had an additional special ability, injecting his blood into the opponent's body. Once that was done, Hyun-woo pulled back the spider silk and retrieved the sword. The zombie that had just been infected with his blood quickly became a juicy piece of prey for the other zombies, while Hyun-woo seized the opportunity to flee. However, the leader was always the smartest one. It was not fooled by Hyun-woo's little trick and continued ordering the small fry to chase after him. Hyun-woo climbed up the ladder as fast as he possibly could. The young man hurriedly pushed open the manhole cover and struggled to crawl up to the surface. Although these zombies were the same level as Hyun-woo, they had all been specially trained soldiers before, and with their numbers and ferocity, it was hard to know whether he could beat them. Hyun-woo felt as if his mind were stretched tight like a bowstring. Right now, he could not think of any good strategy to deal with these monsters, who had both skill and intelligence. A zombie holding a rifle climbed up from the sewer. Quick-eyed and quick-handed, it fired several bullets in succession, all of them hitting Hyun-woo and causing him to collapse. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. That silence was a sign of death. Hyun-woo also realized it because those bullet wounds were making him bleed. Hyun-woo's blood had been cursed, so it carried a sweet scent that lured monsters. Because of that, behind him, the defective venoms were also surging over in droves. In front of him were zombies, and behind him were countless brainless fiends. Hyun-woo only needed to hold out for another 46 minutes to complete the trial. However, in this situation, 46 minutes was more than enough time for these fiends to butcher him who knew how many times. In that urgent situation, Hyun-woo had to use a crystal to restore his mana, then use the domination skill. Because this skill consumed a great deal of stamina, however, it still displayed its effectiveness. The zombies began lunging at the defective venoms and tearing them apart. It looked both horrifying and nauseating, but that was exactly what Hyun-woo wanted. In truth, Hyun-woo could not control monsters. But among those big, brainless monsters, many had been bitten by the mosquitoes that had sucked Hyun-woo's blood. Using them to spread the scent would make the zombies lose their sense of direction and identify the wrong targets, allowing Hyun-woo to escape this calamity. Just when he thought everything was settled, something suddenly came slicing through the air from behind. Hyun-woo turned around in alarm. Behind him was the leading zombie, along with several bald zombies. Most importantly, every one of them was holding a rifle and already in firing position. The domination skill had no effect on them because they were standing too far away. Before he could think of a way to deal with them, the leading zombie gave the order. All the guns were loaded, and Hyun-woo was only one trigger pull away from becoming a human target full of bullets. At that life-or-death moment, Kusin appeared again like a god. In its hand was the upgraded scythe. With one clean slash, several zombie heads were severed from their necks at the same time. At times like this, you could truly see just how valuable an assistant like Kusin was. It really was ridiculously cool. Kusin's weapon had been upgraded into the Winter Scythe. Because of that, it had gained a special ability. After every opponent it finished off, the surrounding area would freeze. After its subordinates all had their heads knocked clean off by Kusin, the leading zombie became extremely furious. It picked up its gun itself, wanting to eliminate Hyun-woo and Kusin. However, with the special ability just mentioned, even the gun barrel had been frozen. Kusin was as fast as lightning and seized the opportunity, closing in on the leading zombie. With just one slash, the entire arm holding the gun was cut clean off. And with Kusin adding a bonus kick with all its might, you can imagine just how miserable this guy's ending was. Watching Kusin swing the scythe all over the place, Hyun-woo did not know whether to feel happy or sad. Kusin had not been particularly submissive before, but ever since Hyun-woo gave it that scythe, it had become much more obedient. In this world, it really was true that anything could be bribed with material goods. While he was absorbed in watching the battle, Hyun-woo was almost ambushed from behind by a defective venom. He managed to dodge, but he still felt that the situation was not good. His mana was gradually running out, yet it felt as if both the monsters and the zombies were increasing in number. Also, far away on the horizon, a red cloud was flying toward them. Hyun-woo did not even need to look to know that it was obviously mosquitoes. This species was nocturnal, so when the sun went down, they became much more excited. Seeing the swarm of mosquitoes flying closer and closer, Hyun-woo opened his inventory and took out something he had painstakingly made. It was a large cloak, big enough to cover his whole body, woven from spider silk. On one side were the brainless monsters. On another side were the zombies, and the swarm of mosquitoes was also approaching. But it seemed Hyun-woo was still fairly confident in his chances of victory. The mosquitoes charged in like a storm, but thanks to the cloak, Hyun-woo was completely unharmed. On the contrary, the zombies and monsters became even more out of control because the massive mosquitoes greatly limited their vision. Hyun-woo became even more confident that he could survive until the very last second. But it really was never wise to let his guard down at any time, because immediately afterward, a zombie grabbed his leg. With instincts no different from a dog's, it immediately took a bite out of Hyun-woo's leg. Pain spread through him very quickly. The bite was poisonous, and Hyun-woo was also bleeding heavily, and bleeding meant attracting even more enemies. Besides, the young man had already been bleeding continuously up to now, so if he did not handle it quickly, he would die from excessive blood loss anyway. Thinking it, Hyun-woo acted. He controlled several mosquitoes with his authority. They found a defective venom and sucked its blood. The monster was quickly drained of blood until it turned into a dried-up corpse. What was even crazier immediately afterward was that the mosquitoes transferred the monster blood they had just sucked into Hyun-woo's body to replenish the blood he had lost. His body rapidly underwent abnormal changes. The monsters surrounding him were immediately dealt with cleanly by Hyun-woo. However, under the white cloak, the handsome, bright face from before was no longer there. Hyun-woo's body had transformed until he was not much different from those monsters. If Zombin saw him now, she would probably faint because her boyfriend had become far too terrifying. Because his body had been transformed, Hyun-woo's strength had also increased greatly. Many monsters still approached him, but Hyun-woo dealt with them all cleanly. Still, to be honest, this guy's new interface looked way too terrifying. Hyun-woo grabbed a monster by the head and sucked its blood. It was so insane that even the surrounding monsters froze in fear. The system announced that Hyun-woo's poison blood had gained a new property, starving blood. When he consumed starving blood, his physical strength would increase by 30% and stop once it was used up. But while it was active, Hyun-woo would suffer terrible hunger and would have to keep eating non-stop, or he would die from being devoured by the skill. No wonder Hyun-woo currently felt extremely hungry. His hands and feet were trembling, and his body was growing so thin it could be seen with the naked eye. Still, it had to be admitted that Hyun-woo's strength had increased significantly. Now he could easily snap the zombies' necks with one hand. High above, all the stars once again watched Hyun-woo. This made him furious. If those constellations had not all taken a liking to Hyun-woo and fought over him, he would never have had to suffer one beating after another like this. Hyun-woo went berserk, unleashing almost all the power inside him. This internal force was so great that it was like a shock wave. All the zombies and monsters were frightened. Hyun-woo descended from high in the sky, both majestic and terrifying, looking just like the god of death. He attacked relentlessly with his short sword. The more he fought, the more bloodthirsty he became. The monsters fell like harvested grain. However, in one careless moment, Hyun-woo was punched by a defective venom-like monster that looked extremely muscular. The punch was so powerful that it sent him flying far away. Because he had also exhausted his strength, Hyun-woo lay flat on the ground. The monster quickly came over as well. It leapt high into the air and struck straight down at Hyun-woo. It was another blow so powerful that the road beneath cracked apart, and Hyunwoo felt that his skull had almost turned into tofu. Following the scent of blood, the huge monsters once again swarmed over to tear apart this tasty prey. One, two, and then countless more quickly gathered around him. Hyunwoo's body was swallowed up by the massive monsters. They struck and bit him, leaving Hyunwoo able only to scream in pain and despair. It seemed as though the mission would fail here again. But this guy was even harder to kill than expected. Hyunwoo suddenly jerked his head up, then sank his teeth into a monster's neck. This guy's anger had already reached its peak. He stood atop the pile of monster corpses, gritted his teeth, and swore he would kill every last one of them. Time flowed slowly, and Hyunwoo grew more and more frenzied. Sometimes he went so insane that I almost thought he was the villain. Hyunwoo's new glove tripled his grip strength, so the monsters' heads were easily crushed by him, as if he were squeezing watermelons. The area was filled with screams and the terrifying stench of blood. Countless monsters had died, and the city, already in ruins, now looked even more like a battlefield. At this moment, the zombie leader was also struggling miserably amid the chaotic pile of corpses. He found it utterly unbelievable. Even though he had brought an entire fleet of intelligent zombies with him, he had still lost to someone who looked as delicate as Hyunwoo. But since almost all his subordinates were dead, finding a way to escape was now the best option. But before he could even think of a way to run, he saw the bloodthirsty Hyunwoo sitting terrifyingly atop the mound of corpses. Hyunwoo approached step by step, and the zombie felt more despair with each step. He grabbed the severed arm of another monster and threw it at Hyunwoo. But something like that could not possibly do any damage. With one wave of Hyunwoo's hand, the zombie's own arm automatically fell off like leaves along a street in autumn. Not giving his enemy a chance to escape, Hyunwoo rushed forward and used his sharp, mutated teeth to bite through his skull. Time finally reached the very last second, and Hyunwoo's 2-day survival mission was finally complete. Countless system notifications crowded together and popped up again. Aside from receiving the mission completion reward, Hyunwoo was also freed from the curse of hunger and absorbed another fragment. He lay on the battlefield, his face transformed back to normal. He was too tired and too hungry. Thinking back on everything that had just happened, even Hyunwoo himself felt it had been far too terrifying. But before he could recover, an extremely loud sound came from somewhere. Along with it, an unidentified object was also approaching. The sight before him could easily frighten anyone with a weak heart to death. An army of monsters was advancing toward Hyunwoo. Some demons were blowing horns and beating drums in an extremely ostentatious display, while another group wore men's hanbok and carried swords at their waists. There were even several beheaded demons carrying a palanquin. Pulling the palanquin was a disgusting-looking fish. These things looked human, but they were clearly not human. Hyunwoo could clearly sense that every single one of them was incredibly powerful. The palanquin was lowered, and a tall, long-haired figure stepped out. Under the light of the crimson moon, Hyunwoo gradually saw his face clearly. This being was beautiful, yet looked extremely bizarre. He had 2 horns on his forehead and wore gold jewelry all over his body. He was Kawaro, Lord of Satisfaction and Sloth, with a level as high as 118. Even though Hyunwoo was someone who risked his life without hesitation, he trembled under this man's pressure. Kawaro looked at Hyunwoo with a highly appraising gaze. He himself was extremely excited to see that a small, low-level human like Hyunwoo could survive among these monsters. In contrast to this man's overly friendly appearance, Hyunwoo was extremely tense. He remained silent in response to every question Kawaro asked. But this lord did not lose interest because of that. After the fierce battle just now, Hyunwoo had lost his right leg. Kawaro even kindly treated it for him, though this kindness was somewhat nauseating because he took the leg of a dead zombie and attached it to Hyunwoo. After that, he demanded that Hyunwoo follow him. Hyunwoo did not know Kawaro's exact goal, but he thought Kawaro was not much different from those constellations, merely wanting him to join his tribe. Even though he was at a disadvantage, Hyunwoo was still a stubborn loudmouth who was not afraid of death. So before things were even made clear, he refused to join Kawaro and had no intention of becoming his food either. This resolute attitude instead made Kawaro laugh, like an adult patiently explaining things to a child. Kawaro began telling Hyunwoo about the desires in life. It turned out that he had once been only an ordinary human. But greed had turned Kawaro into an existence that was neither human nor demon. The ambition to devour everything and his ultimate rage had accompanied him along this path. In the end, Kawaro became one of the most powerful beings, with enough strength to devour everything in the world. Naturally, he also gathered a group of underlings whose combat power could not be underestimated. And now, there was Hyunwoo. Kawaro saw Hyunwoo's latent power and desire, so he currently wanted Hyunwoo to submit and become a part of him. In the real world, Zanbin had just woken up from dozing off. Hyunwoo had been gone for so long and still had not returned. On this side, Hyunwoo put on an obedient appearance like a little kitten, as if he had already been subdued. He put away his glove and took Kawaro's hand. However, right after that, Hyunwoo turned into a wildcat and bit hard into his hand until it bled. Kawaro was furious to the point of madness, and with one swing of his hand, he sent Hyunwoo tumbling far away. He had already been greatly irritated, but Hyunwoo even used that foul mouth of his to call Kawaro a traitor. This successfully made him completely lose control. Kawaro's pressure was so powerful that Hyunwoo felt as though he were suffocating. At some point, Kawaro had arrived in front of him. Feeling that this human brat was far too stubborn and could not be persuaded gently, Kawaro wanted to cleanly deal with him and be done with it. Hyunwoo suddenly remembered the words of Monstrin, the Whispering Star. According to her, the order of this world was currently at a stalemate, and the way to resolve that problem was a new player. Hyunwoo knew that he himself was the key. Suddenly, standing before Kawaro, he was no longer afraid. After all, he had already died many times. What did it matter if he was torn apart one more time? Kawaro was no longer polite either. He grabbed Hyunwoo by the throat with one hand and lifted him up as easily as lifting a small cat. He began pouring power into his hand, as if determined to kill this tiny human. At the crucial moment, Hyunwoo still could not die, because the system had issued a notification that the strange constellation Augustro was watching him. A terrifying force surged in and blasted Kawaro far away. 1 second earlier, he had still been showing off his might before Hyunwoo, but the next second, he was lying miserably among the bricks and rubble. The city shook with a thunderous rumble. Kawaro became utterly servile. He was afraid. He hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed, begging for forgiveness. However, the earthquake showed no sign of stopping. Terrified, Kawaro had to order his entire army to retreat in haste. Left behind was Hyunwoo, lying on the ground in a half-conscious state. Thunder and lightning began rumbling across the sky, as if a god had been angered. Hyunwoo still did not understand what had happened. He only knew that Kawaro had fled, that he feared something terrifying beyond even this sky. Exhaustion had accumulated, and too many questions remained unanswered. Hyunwoo dragged his weary, battered body along the road. After roaring for a while, as if to vent, he fell unconscious again. While dazed, Hyunwoo seemed to see a familiar figure. It was his Zanbin. Yet when he opened his eyes, it was not Zanbin, nor was it the real world. Renian was staring at him with wide eyes. This little girl was the one who had found Hyunwoo while he was unconscious. At that time, he had been like a monster, his eyes glowing blue, and he had even rushed over to bite the girl. Hyunwoo also did not know what was wrong with him, but for now, he set that matter aside. The mission was complete, so he had to check the reward first. Inside the gift chest sent by Iagalem was a platinum card. Previous missions had only rewarded him with gold and silver cards, so this time's reward seemed much better. But when he opened it, Hyunwoo only received a blade that looked completely ordinary. He used a monocle to inspect it, but all of the blade stats were very low. The blade itself was also only of common quality, while all of Hyunwoo's equipment was at least legend grade. However, this blade had a special effect. It could absorb other weapons and obtain all the properties of the sacrificed item. Even Renian felt that this sword was very good. So Hyunwoo did not hesitate and took out the short sword he was using to sacrifice it to this ordinary blade. The moment the short sword touched that blade, it seemed to come alive, opening its mouth wide and greedily devouring the short sword. The transformation that followed left Hyunwoo stunned. The sacrificed weapon had been completely absorbed, and that ordinary blade became a fine sort of legend grade, clearly much better than the short sword. This made Hyunwoo extremely happy. Once everything was settled, Hyunwoo suddenly wanted to return to the ruins from the previous day. That was the place where Renian had discovered the dried skeleton, and where Hyunwoo had also stolen the monocle from it. Because he felt uneasy, he went back to tidy everything up and bury the skeleton. This guy, despite how he looked, was actually quite sentimental. He began thinking about this world, about the things he hated, such as the zombies, the gluttonous star, and Kawaro. But he also felt that he was like them, since he also controlled Kusin and gave orders to Renian in the same way. However, Hyunwoo had never done those things for personal ambition. Because of that, he was able to comfort himself somewhat, telling himself that he was different from those monsters. That was enough thinking. Anymore, and things would get depressing. So Hyunwoo stood up. At first, he only intended to rummage around for some form of identification belonging to the skeleton so he could make a gravestone for him. But by chance, he found a diary. And unexpectedly, inside it were complete records about this world, including full information on the events that had occurred and how to stop them. Hyunwoo felt as if he had found a treasure. Standing before the gradually rising dawn, Hyunwoo felt more excited than ever. With this notebook in hand, it meant he had obtained the key to saving humanity. Hyunwoo swore that he would fulfill the last wish of the notebook's owner. From this dark hell, he would save all of humanity. After grasping that important information, Hyunwoo decided to temporarily leave hell and return home. This time, as usual, he did not know where he would land. In the end, Hyunwoo fell onto the edge of a forest inside a park. His ugly, disheveled appearance was enough to scare a young mother who was looking for her lost son half to death. That night, Hyunwoo changed into a handsome suit, slicked back his hair, and went on a date with Rumin at a high-class restaurant. She was rather surprised, because after not seeing each other for so long, Hyunwoo's first request was for her to take him out to spend money. Not only was Rumin surprised, she was also curious. She knew very well that in this era, people often lived extravagantly. They spent mountains of money buying supercars or expensive luxury goods. Rumin knew Hyunwoo was not that kind of person. Because of that, she became even more curious about his request. Did he want to experience the feeling of high society? He had struggled and worked hard to earn money. Now he wanted to live like a successful person. The two clinked glasses. Anyone who knew nothing about Hyunwoo would definitely think he was a vain, crude person after hearing this. But Rumin knew very clearly what Hyunwoo had gone through, including his difficult past and the hard time he had spent struggling in hell. I was wondering if you longed to live like a businessman. Honestly, he could not deny it. Although he was considered nouveau riche, Hyunwoo had always been very cautious, spending money according to a plan and knowing how to calculate for the future. This was something Rumin really liked about him. Honestly, you're the best man I've ever dated. Hey, this was clearly a compliment. So why did Hyunwoo feel a tightness in his chest when he heard the part about the men I've ever dated? During the time Hyunwoo was in hell, Rumin had been conducting a new research project at school. The research topic was how much mana concentration could be maintained until leveling up. Coincidentally, this issue was also somewhat related to what Hyunwoo was trying to understand. With a wave of his hand, he opened his status window. Hyunwoo was startled. His level, which had been stuck at 21 for a long time, had suddenly increased to 26. What had happened? At the same time, Kusin, in hell, was also madly slaughtering monsters. After such a bloody, brutal scene, its body also underwent a transformation. Kusin's size had grown much larger, and its level had rapidly risen to 27. Meanwhile, after dinner ended, Hyunwoo and Rumin returned to his private home. The report on Hyunwoo's awakened abilities was now available. At last, they could finally understand why everyone who had read that report had completely lost their minds. Rumin presented a photo. It showed the blood and crystals accumulated in Hyunwoo's lower energy center when viewed under a microscope. Since mana was usually accumulated in the lower energy center, when blood was drawn from there, those crystals would also come out with it. Those crystals would be used to calculate his level. Rank. At 1 star, they are shaped like needles. At 3 stars, they are triangular. But your crystals? Rumin hesitated for a moment before continuing. They are neither needle-shaped nor triangular. They are round. It is a crystal sample that has never been seen before, except in one case. What case? The case of monsters. Hyunwoo felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He unconsciously remembered the time he lost control in hell, and cold sweat broke out over him. Seeing that he did not look well, Rumen hurriedly waved her hands and explained, "I am not saying you are a monster. It is just that there are a few similarities. Everything else is the same as a human's. But the crystals are the most dominant factor, so mana has the greatest influence on your body." This meant that Hyunwoo's realm could break through far beyond what they could imagine. Rumen had only heard people say that 5 stars was the highest rank. But with Hyunwoo, she thought his body might even be able to reach 6 stars. Just thinking about it made her excited. How could she not be proud when the person she loved had such invincible potential? Hyunwoo was not too sure either, but whenever he wondered about this, the system only sent back a single answer. His physical body had awakened mana. A mana flow had begun to exist within his body. There was no additional information about Hyunwoo's rank at all. "Come to think of it, you're level 20 right now, aren't you?" Rumen asked curiously. "That was before. I'm level 26 now." "Oh my god, you went up 6 whole levels in just 11 days? Rumen was both surprised and admiring. His girlfriend's reaction made Hyunwoo feel extremely proud. No wonder Rumen had felt that something about Hyunwoo had been different ever since he came back. It turned out he had leveled up, and 6 levels in one go at that. It seemed Hyunwoo would grow even more in the future. He would definitely become a famous adventurer. Because of that, Rumen began considering finding him another assistant. "Why would we do that? I do not want outsiders knowing about this. Or do you already have someone in mind?" Of course, Rumen had not prepared anything. The idea of hiring another assistant had only popped into her head a few seconds ago. But it was true that, given the current situation, she felt they would not be able to hide Hyunwoo's strength for much longer. That was because the Sejong laboratory seemed to have discovered something. Hyunwoo did not even know what the Sejong laboratory was. That is the name people use for the Special Ability Research Department. Sejong manages all special ability users, items, and everything related to national dungeons. They also keep records of special ability users' ranks there. During the days Hyunwoo was in the dungeon, they had sent him many emails. They're definitely acting like this because of your strange test results. The more Rumen spoke, the more her head hurt. Recently, a great deal of spying had been aimed at Hyunwoo, especially after he took part in that assessment competition. It seemed the Sejong laboratory wanted to disperse that attention. Hearing his lover say that, Hyunwoo remembered that there had indeed been quite a few calls from unknown numbers lately, but he had thought they were annoying scam calls, so he had not answered. He took out his phone and began searching through his inbox. Although he was not very interested, Hyunwoo needed to know what they had discovered about him. That is true. Rumen let out a long sigh. Hyunwoo stared at her for a while. Recently, Rumen had been troubled enough taking care of matters for him, and yet he had only been focused on leveling in hell, without paying any attention to his girlfriend at all. Thinking of that, Hyunwoo tossed his phone aside. "Come here." A moment later, Rumen was sitting neatly in Hyunwoo's lap, comfortably enjoying the feeling of him drying her hair. Hyunwoo did not want Rumen to suffer because of him, so he advised her to go back to focusing on her research career. Things must be difficult at the laboratory too. "Should I buy you some more experimental equipment? Equipment is not cheap, you know. Besides, we do not have anywhere to put it. Then I will buy a house too." Hyunwoo declared firmly. A man this thoughtful, wealthy, and kind would make even me fall for him, let alone Rumen. In any case, this girl had been with him since he was dirt poor. Hyunwoo wanted to cherish and protect her with everything he had. Next came a romantic, affectionate scene straight out of a Korean drama. Rumen had time to look at her boyfriend up close for a long while. She discovered that his hands had gained yet another pile of scars. "Probably because I did not have enough healing potions. It is not a problem." Hyunwoo did not want his lover to worry, so he only gave a vague explanation. "Does it hurt a lot? They will heal eventually." Rumen looked at him for a long while again. Then she opened her mouth and took a big bite on Hyunwoo's hand to mark her territory. The two of them flirted and cuddled for a while. Whatever you imagine happens next is up to you. The next morning, while Rumen was still sound asleep, Hyunwoo had already left first. Memories of his most recent battle flooded back, when he had gone almost insane, lost all reason, and fought the gluttonous monsters. The sensation of devouring his enemies made Hyunwoo feel utterly disgusted, even in memory. He lowered his head and dry heaved for a while, but there was no other way. He had to do this in order to remember the details of the battle recorded by the battle assistant. Thinking of this, Hyun-woo straightened again, took a deep breath, and tried once more. A moment later, the system sent a notification. You have obtained a new fragment. Hyun-woo opened his palm. As expected, the mark on his hand had changed. Hyun-woo picked up the monocle and began examining the power's attributes. A window containing all the necessary information about the new fragment appeared. Attribute: absorption. Special ability: you can select an enemy you have personally eliminated and turn it into your kin. You can summon your kin anywhere, in any situation, even when traveling through space. If the target's level is higher than yours, control may become ineffective. You can absorb the nutrients, abilities, stamina, mana, and part of the skills of your kin for a short period of time. This duration is directly proportional to the target's calories. A pile of ellipses appeared above Hyun-woo's head. This attribute was far too perverted, but he felt it would definitely be useful in the trial of the gluttonous star Iagolem. And today, Hyun-woo still had one more important matter. He had arranged to meet an old acquaintance, none other than Park Ui-soo. Why did you call me and tell me to come here? Do you want a rematch? Oh, you really are impatient. If you want, I will fight you. So just prepare yourself. This brat's arrogant attitude had never stopped annoying Park Ui-soo. What are you trying to do this time? Just stand still. Hyun-woo gestured to Park Ui-soo. He was using his new loot, the monocle, to assess the other man. Very quickly, Park Ui-soo's information appeared. This man was level 40, and his skills were split slash and stealth while breathing is stopped. Hyun-woo was extremely excited, but Park Ui-soo was not in a very good mood. He gritted his teeth and spoke each word in a low voice. Kong Hyun-woo, do you think I have that much free time? As expected, Hyun-woo tossed the monocle to Park Ui-soo. You are pretty impressive, even with ordinary skills like those. Of course, Hyun-woo had no intention of presenting the monocle to the other man with both hands. Simply put, he only wanted Park Ui-soo to use it to check his current level again. After all, the two of them would have many things to discuss today. Hyun-woo felt he should show himself off a little, so that Park Ui-soo would have enough faith in what he was about to say next. Park Ui-soo was also extremely surprised that Hyun-woo had reached level 26 in only 11 days, along with the strange shape of his crystals. Now he understood why the Sejong laboratory had been so quiet lately. In the past, they had only delayed announcing the rankings of the Adventurer Assessment Competition once. Hyun-woo's case, however, was truly unprecedented. This had caused the laboratory to receive many complaints from guilds and members. That was not hard to understand, because an adventurer's rank was money itself. So a delay in announcing it caused no small problem. Park Ui-soo returned the monocle to Hyun-woo. After pondering for a while, he still decided to warn him about a few things. Some people will probably approach you soon. At this point, Park Ui-soo truly no longer had any doubts about the potential of the young man before him. Hyun-woo, meanwhile, still maintained his overbearing attitude, hoping Park Ui-soo would become his loyal subordinate. Even so, Park Ui-soo politely refused. That was because the relationships binding him were never simple in the first place. Hyun-woo still did not give up on his determination. Facing an elder like Park Ui-soo, he remained extremely arrogant. This is the only time you can express your loyalty to me. The next time we meet, you may have to kneel before me, right after I bring down Lee Ji-tae. Park Ui-soo knew he was not joking. He did not hate Hyun-woo's arrogance either, because he knew Hyun-woo truly had the ability. Seeing that Park Ui-soo still refused to yield, Hyun-woo did not rush to pressure him further. If that is the case, can I ask you for a favor? What favor? It is nothing much. I just want to introduce you to someone very special. A few steps away from them, a mass of pitch-black liquid suddenly appeared on the ground. From that sludge, a giant goblin slowly rose up. Park Ui-soo immediately became extremely vigilant. Hyun-woo was also badly startled by this entrance. It was only when Park Ui-soo drew his sword that he realized the problem and hurriedly stopped him. The goblin began to speak. Did you call me boss? It has been a while since you called me, so I thought you had died. Boss. Park Ui-soo could not process this form of address for a moment. Kirsten's appearance had changed so much that even Hyun-woo did not recognize it. That was thanks to the scythe he had given it. By slaughtering the Iagolems, Kirsten had leveled up and become much tougher. Park Uisu was very surprised that Hyunwoo could take in a monster as a subordinate and even communicate with it. This is surprising, but if you need to ask me for a favor, then it must be something important. So why did you have to call over a dim-witted goblin? It was understandable for a high-level human like Park Uisu to look down on monsters. But Kirsten was no ordinary monster, so was very offended when it heard the phrase a dim-witted goblin. Kirsten gave a fake laugh, but then gripped its scythe and closed in on Park Uisu at lightning speed. The two weapons collided, scattering sparks and producing an ear-piercing sound. Park Uisu's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He could not deny that this monster was too fast and too strong. This strength had already far surpassed the normal limits of goblins. Kirsten, stop. Try running your mouth one more time, old man. Hey, stop, or I will kill you. Hyunwoo lost his patience. Although Kirsten was not very willing, it did not dare defy its master's will. Both it and Park Uisu lowered their weapons at the same time. Now Park Uisu had vaguely realized the identity of the monster in front of him. It was the special goblin from the one-star dungeon, the one that had recently terrified recruits in the rumors. The favor Hyunwoo wanted to ask was also related to Kirsten. He wanted Park Uisu to temporarily keep it somewhere secret. Park Uisu thought he had misheard. This was a goblin, not a 3-year-old child. Why would it need an old man like him to look after it? That is not it. You only need to send him somewhere. More precisely, he wanted him sent to a special dungeon. Hyunwoo had come up with this plan after finishing the memoir he had picked up in Hell. That place had originally been Earth many years in the future, and the memoir contained records of the future, the major incidents that would soon occur, who would be the central figures, who would die, and how Earth would reach its end. The earliest incident will be the monster tide that would erupt at the Jeonju dungeon on the mountain of the same name. In only 10 short minutes, the defense lines would be broken. Somehow, they would still manage to stop the monsters. However, after the corruption of a weapons manufacturing company closely connected to adventurers was exposed, the chaos would continue. After that would come a series of disasters, bringing the first wave of despair to humanity. It was true that those things had not happened yet, but precisely because of that, Hyunwoo had to prepare in advance to prevent them from occurring. Park Uisu let out a long sigh. He did not want to get involved with monsters, even if Hyunwoo was the one asking. But Hyunwoo was not asking for free. He generously pulled a phosphorescent crystal from his pocket. I'm still giving you a sweet gift, old man. That tiny crystal was naturally not worth much money. But what Hyunwoo wanted to remind him of was that, even now, he was still the most valuable supplier of phosphorescent crystals that Park Uisu did not want to lose. Of course, taking advantage of the occasion, he also did not forget to force the crystal price to double. That made Park Uisu's face turn dark with anger. This brat was clearly robbing him. He said through gritted teeth, Kong Hyunwoo, if you are not the only source of supply, then you definitely would not be able to walk out of here today with your body intact. Hyunwoo naturally did not flinch at these threats. He also did not let Park Uisu suffer a loss, agreeing to double the amount of goods he supplied. Hearing this, Park Uisu's anger eased a little. Some time ago, Park Uisu had begged until his tongue almost broke, but Hyunwoo had not agreed to increase the supply at all. As a result, the sales channels under Park Uisu had suffered a severe shortage. Those high-level hunters already had everything. They were loaded with money, so the only reason they wanted phosphorescent crystals was probably to become stronger. Park Uisu could not refute anything anymore. This young man had both muscle and cunning. It seemed Park Uisu could not make Hyunwoo take a loss. The next day, Hyunwoo fulfilled his promise and took his girlfriend to look at houses. The real estate agent led the two of them to a secluded villa. Roommen kept gaping at how luxurious and spacious it was. This place did not look like a house so much as a bunker. It had been built during the military dictatorship era by a cowardly ultra-rich man and his son because they believed North Korea would continue bombing. By the time of that ultra-rich man's grandson, the dungeon era had begun. He was even more afraid of monsters attacking, so he completed the house that his grandfather and father had built. This place is a shelter built to withstand guerrilla attacks, bombings, and even monsters. The more Hyunwoo listened, the more he felt this place suited them. He wondered why the real estate agent had introduced such a suitable place to them last. The agent fell silent for a while, then began telling the eerie story related to this villa. The truth was that, a few years ago, that ultra-rich grandson had met with an accident. He had been killed right in front of the house. A man who had spent his whole life fearing the outside world so much that he only hid inside had been killed while trying to escape outside. The culprit still had not been found. There was only one road leading into the mountain villa, and, of course, there were surveillance cameras. Moreover, the house had only one entrance and exit, but the investigators still could not find any traces at all. In the end, that case became a huge question mark and remains unsolved to this day. The story of the grandson's death spread and became distorted many times over. After a few years, it became a legend. Because of that, it is very difficult for people to confirm how safe this place is. Now that I have said this much, you understand why I did not want to bring up this place, right? Hyun-woo was not afraid, but he thought Rumin would surely dislike such a gloomy place. Unexpectedly, her reaction far exceeded his expectations. Rumin was extremely excited and even asked Hyun-woo to set up cameras and filming equipment here if they moved in. There might be ghosts, you know. Wow, that sounds so fun. Hyun-woo looked at his girlfriend's excited appearance, unsure whether to be happy or sad. But in the end, he still decided to choose this house. The real estate agent also did not expect Hyun-woo to close the deal so quickly. He stepped aside and called the owner. After briefly explaining the situation, the owner said she wanted to speak directly with Hyun-woo. As soon as he put the phone to his ear, a woman's voice came through from the other end. "Hello, Mr. Kong Hyun-woo." That one simple sentence made the young man's hair stand on end, because he had not even told the real estate agent his name yet. The person on the other end seemed to sense his confusion and introduced herself first. "I am Director Gwon Ki-young of Sejong Laboratory. I'm very glad you're interested in the Special Ability Department's building. There is something I would like to discuss with you as well. So let's meet and talk. I'll be there soon." Rumin was extremely alarmed when she heard the director's name, but it seemed the woman had come prepared. The proof was that before the two of them even had time to leave, a car had already appeared in front of the house. Capital really did work fast. Gwon Ki-young stepped confidently out of the car. As soon as she confirmed her target, she quickly rushed over to greet him. Of course, Gwon Ki-young did not forget to greet Rumin as well. However, Rumin did not look especially pleased to see this director. "You're still working at that laboratory? I told you that man is exploiting you. Don't waste your talent like that. Compared to working with you, every day there is like heaven, Professor." It turned out Gwon Ki-young was Rumin's former superior. The tense atmosphere between these two women frightened Hyun-woo even more than facing monsters in hell. Gwon Ki-young did not waste her precious time coming all this way just to taunt Rumin. She quickly returned to the main issue. Gwon Ki-young had already looked thoroughly into the fact that Hyun-woo was not currently affiliated with any guild. If that was the case, she was willing to give him this villa for free. On top of that, there would be an annual salary of 80 million, an official pension, and an insurance card on the level of a deputy prime minister. Of course, there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. In exchange for those things, Hyun-woo had to work at Sejong Laboratory. Hyun-woo laughed. He found this offer utterly ridiculous. What could he possibly do for a laboratory? But Gwon Ki-young continued, trying to persuade him. She said all they needed him to do was take a few tests, answer a few questions, and occasionally let them draw his blood and check his physical abilities. That was all. Hearing that, Hyun-woo immediately realized they wanted to hire him as a test subject. The figure Gwon Ki-young offered was indeed very generous. "Do I look that desperate for money to you? A building like this can't be bought with money alone. You sure like to ramble, don't you?" Gwon Ki-young was both a scientist and a businesswoman. To her, time was money, so she demanded that Hyun-woo make a choice right away. Either accept, refuse, or they could negotiate further. But this young man was not ordinary either. He demanded additional conditions beyond what Gwon Ki-young had just mentioned. First, Sejong Laboratory could not interfere if Hyun-woo intended to join a guild. Second, he needed to be certain that the research contents would not be known to anyone other than himself and the laboratory. "If you can do that, I'll think about it." Hyun-woo thought that with the demands he had just made, Gwon Ki-young would definitely give up. Unexpectedly, she grabbed his hand without hesitation and readily agreed, even saying that if Hyun-woo needed anything else, he only had to say so. It was that easy. If she was the head of a national-level research facility, wouldn't she be required to report her research results? Hyun-woo thought suspiciously. He will have to hide it very carefully, because I already know about his constitution. On this side, Gwon Ki-young was also calculating many things in secret. If she obtained Hyun-woo, her plan would definitely succeed sooner. But as for what that plan was, I still do not know. Meanwhile, Park Uisu had carried out the plan at Hyunwoo's request. He ordered a hunter to bring supplies to the Jeonju dungeon for adventurer Ha Sungjin's team because he had proper documents, and Ha Sungjin's team had indeed not returned for 6 days. The dungeon guards easily let him through. As soon as he reached the entrance, the man unlocked the heavy bag he had brought with him. But of course, there were no supplies inside. Kirsten crawled out from within. Its appearance frightened the hunter so badly that he broke out in a cold sweat. He had no idea what Park Uisu was planning by bringing a talking monster here. However, he had no energy to concern himself with that much. Once the job was done, he immediately left. Kirsten observed the surrounding area. Countless flickering, glowing eyes were staring in this direction. It recalled what Park Uisu had said before it came here. An ordinary hunter would take an entire week to clear a dungeon like this. Kirsten held the scythe in its hand and smiled contemptuously. Aside from Hyunwoo, humans were extremely weak and incompetent in its eyes. For a dungeon of this scale, it would only need 3 days to finish it. Meanwhile, Hyunwoo and Rumin had moved into their new house. Rumin quickly encountered her first disaster. The mosquitoes on this mountain were as big as mutants. There were too many to swat, and insecticide would not kill them. With no other choice, Rumin took out a lighter and started burning them. Hey, I think that nephew died from mosquito bites. Rumin collapsed into a chair. Now that they had a new house, she wondered what Hyunwoo would do next. Invest in stocks, he answered briefly. Rumin had not thought that someone like Hyunwoo, who only knew how to fight, would know anything about investing. Curious, she looked over his plan. The list of companies whose stocks Hyunwoo planned to buy were all companies that she did not find very promising. In her mind, Rumin secretly cursed Hyunwoo for being an idiot. Hyunwoo knew that too, but he could not tell Rumin that he knew the future. He chose to invest because he needed enough funds to carry out his plan. At the very least, he needed as much money as the Taezong Guild before it was too late. At that moment, Rumin suddenly noticed the memoir Hyunwoo always kept by his side. What is that thing you're always carrying around? A photo album? Don't be shocked. This is a journal of the apocalypse. It records the fall of humanity. Hyunwoo answered with absolute seriousness, but in Rumin's eyes, he looked no different from an idiot. She thought her boyfriend had developed the same adolescent syndrome that newly awakened ability users often had. That was why he liked pretending to be cool and dangerous while talking about absurd things like the extinction of humanity. I'm telling the truth. Rumin burst out laughing. No matter how serious Hyunwoo was, he could not stop her from falling back on the sofa and laughing wildly. In that case, he might as well give up explaining. Just then, a new notification appeared on Hyunwoo's phone. Rumin thought it was a message from the laboratory, but when he opened it, the new message contained only a few words, "Delivery complete." Needless to say, it was a message from Park Uisu. And that package was none other than Kirsten. Hyunwoo could not suppress the grin that was about to stretch all the way to his ears. Perfect. This would definitely be the beginning of his grand entrance. Rumin did not understand what Hyunwoo meant. She continued thinking this was just like that journal and enjoyed another hearty round of laughter. Now Hyunwoo had truly understood one thing. Some matters were so outrageous that even if he said them out loud, even his lover would think he was talking nonsense. The next day, Hyunwoo went out. His destination was above the Jeonju dungeon. Of course, everything was still very peaceful. Aside from Hyunwoo, no one knew this place would soon become extremely dangerous. Soon, the decline of humanity would begin right here. The abnormal phenomena that occurred one after another in this dungeon would become the first step toward humanity's destruction. And Hyunwoo, who had once lived a poor life at the bottom of society, spending every day searching for phosphorescent crystals in polluted water, would now be reborn. Now, he was humanity's savior. Of course, Hyunwoo's purpose in coming here today was not only to enjoy the scenery, but also to find someone. The person he was looking for was Kong Hae-chun, described in the book as a man wearing a civil servant uniform while taking landscape photos. It seemed Hyunwoo's luck was quite good. The proof was that he did not spend much time before finding this person. When he saw Kong Hae-chun, Hyunwoo approached without hesitation and immediately struck up a conversation. "Hello, may I ask what you're doing here? Who are you?" Kong Hae-chun was a little surprised. After all, being asked something like that right away by a complete stranger was genuinely enough to make someone wary. Come to think of it, young Hyunwoo's emotional intelligence was not exactly high. Hyunwoo realized he had been a little too hasty. He took out his identification card and introduced himself, saying he was only a hunter who was was quite curious about the Jeonju dungeon. Kang Hae-chun assessed him for a while. He did not think this rather suspicious-looking young man was a resident hunter. However, the fact that Hyun-woo was focused only on Jeonju among hundreds of other dungeons made him somewhat suspicious. I'm still a rookie, so I'm curious about a lot of things. If you don't mind, could you tell me what you're photographing? Hyun-woo still insisted on clinging to him like a leech. Seeing that the other party would not let go, Kang Hae-chun had no choice. He explained that he was investigating the possibility of monsters appearing in this flow-type dungeon. To do that, he observed the Jeonju dungeon every day and recorded the data through photographs. Oh, I heard there are many changes inside the dungeon too. Hyun-woo added a harmless comment. Seeing that the other party was young and ignorant, Kang Hae-chun began explaining in more detail what he was studying. According to him, Jeonju was a flow-type dungeon. Its formation and shape could change with each investigation. Because of that, this type of dungeon was always ranked among the most unpredictable. And there was an even bigger problem. Because the dungeon gate was not fixed, it was very difficult to determine whether monsters could enter and exit through it. If monsters truly could escape and appear in Seoul, that would be a major disaster. Actually, you don't need to worry too much. Kang Hae-chun waved his hand in embarrassment. I'm just worrying too much. In truth, no one cares about the results of the investigations I carry out. Although Kang Hae-chun said that, Hyun-woo knew just how significant his research was. This man was also the one who introduced Hyun-woo to the concept of a monster wave. It described a sudden increase in the number of monsters inside a flow-type dungeon, causing it to go out of control and leading to a large number of monsters escaping from the dungeon. Kang Hae-chun was always embarrassed because everyone thought he was worrying too much. But Hyun-woo was the first person to listen so attentively to what he said. That was because Hyun-woo knew how greatly those research results would support humanity. And Kang Hae-chun truly was a talented person. Then has anything changed these past few days? Things have indeed seemed rather strange lately. Kang Hae-chun handed Hyun-woo the phone in his hand. Hyun-woo examined the photos for a while, then gave a serious conclusion. Kang Hae-chun, I believe your research will one day become a great hope for humanity. So be proud and stop feeling ashamed. Well then, goodbye. After saying that, Hyun-woo immediately left. Kang Hae-chun stood there blankly for a long time. That was because it was the first time he had met someone who did not mock or belittle the effort he had put into his research. But after thinking carefully about what had just been said, Kang Hae-chun suddenly froze. Because he had never introduced his name to that young man. Hyun-woo had gone to find Kang Hae-chun mainly to verify whether what was written in the notebook was true. As expected, the photos on Kang Hae-chun's phone perfectly matched the data written inside it. If one observed carefully, one would see that the military had been deployed around this dungeon. The government must also have realized that Jeonju was harboring potential danger. But according to the memoir, only 10 minutes after the monster wave phenomenon appeared, the defensive wall would collapse. A large area surrounding it would become hell. Hyun-woo closed the memoir and left with a strange smile. To be honest, he was greatly looking forward to what would happen next. Over the next 2 months, Hyun-woo had placed Kirsten inside Jeonju and let it do whatever it wanted. This was the most suitable moment, because once the Jeonju dungeon opened and the adventurers began hunting monsters, that scene of death would also begin. What should I do in this situation? Put in a simple effort? No, that still isn't enough. I must work even harder, hard enough to reach the sky. Only when I reach the stars will I truly have invincible power. Hyun-woo's hand clenched into a fist. Although it was unclear what this young man was plotting, judging from his blazing momentum, he must have been certain of victory. At dusk, the scene remained strangely peaceful. No one knew what was about to happen except Hyun-woo. He absent-mindedly paced back and forth around the dungeon boundary. Finally, the ground began to shake. At first it was quite faint, then it gradually grew stronger. That strange smile appeared once again on Hyun-woo's face. The monster wave has finally begun. Well done, Kirsten. Very soon, the military was mobilized for reinforcements. Reporters from various broadcasting stations also immediately arrived to update the situation. Behind a defensive wall, gunfire rang out in rapid succession. It seemed the Korean military still had the situation under control. However, the number of monsters continued, increasing abnormally. Many civilians believed the government needed to declare a monster wave state immediately. But at that moment, the government, the major families, and a large guild were busy blaming one another for the lax dungeon management. Troops continued to be reinforced. However, the situation became less and less favorable. Only a few minutes later, the first defensive line was breached. The hunters and the military were cooperating and doing everything they could to hold the second defensive wall. But the chief of the Hapjeongdong Hunter branch, which was mainly responsible for the Jeonja dungeon, still did not want to declare an emergency monster wave state, because if he did that, all responsibility would fall on his head. What was even more miserable was that the other commanders and branch chiefs were all busy. Although the number of soldiers being deployed continued to increase, an army lacking commanders would certainly suffer defeat. Branch Chief, the second defensive line, is about to be breached. The situation had reached the utmost tension. The professional hunters, under the leadership of the Hapjeongdong Branch Chief, were all ready to fight. The first monsters to pour out past the wall were evolved rats. Although they were not large, they were even harder to deal with than snails or goblins. Fortunately, that branch chief skill was still quite useful. He activated the berserk skill, unleashing a huge shock wave that pushed most of the rats back inside the wall. The other hunters seized this opportunity and rushed forward to finish off the remaining rats stubbornly clinging to the wall. However, the branch chief could not feel much relief, because he knew that even if he used all his strength, he could not push back all the monsters. That berserk move was only a stalling tactic to give the other hunters more time to kill the monsters. Then the worst-case scenario occurred. Cracks gradually appeared across the wall, accompanied by an unmistakable cracking sound. Only about 3 seconds later, the entire massive wall shattered into pieces. The mutated rats poured out along with it. The Hapjeongdong branch chief was struck on the head by a large rock. He collapsed to the ground, a wound on his forehead bleeding profusely. "Branch chief, are you all right?" Another hunter cried out in horror. "I'm Fine. What happened?" But before that hunter could speak, the branch chief found the answer himself. Because behind the broken wall stood an existence that would terrify anyone. It was the level 28 werewolf, the boss of this Jeonju dungeon. The mighty werewolf let out a long howl. That sound turned into invisible bullets with tremendous attack power, flying straight forward. The branch chief looked at that rain of bullets and felt despair in his heart. The commander-in-chief was not here. Everything was over. At the moment the branch chief gave up all hope, a firm hand was placed on his shoulder. Amid the thick dust and smoke, he could not clearly see that person's face, and thought Commander Eod-sung had come to rescue them. "I'm not Commander Eod-sung, the one you've been waiting so desperately for." An unmistakable arrogance appeared on Hyun-woo's face. "But from now on, leave this to me." "Who is this?" Hyun-woo had no time to give him a long explanation. Since the second wall had been breached, monsters were pouring out like a waterfall. Unarmored and alone, Hyun-woo charged into the sea of monsters. His actions quickly drew the reporter's attention. "Someone over there is running toward the monsters all by himself. Judging by his outfit, he doesn't seem to be an all-purpose hunter. Just who on earth is he, and why does he have more guts than sense?" Hyun-woo leaped high into the air and brought a heaven-sent punch down on the swarm of rats. "Watch closely. This is the moment humanity strikes back." Hyun-woo's single blow sent a whole pile of rats to their deaths. Most of the rats were level 17, so they were nothing to him. After all, in hell, even the weakest and most pathetic corpse-eating rats were already level 15. These small fries were only good enough for Hyun-woo to loosen up his muscles a little. Chaos broke out, and these low-level rats could not withstand even one punch from Hyun-woo. Even Hyun-woo himself was surprised, because he had not used even 1/3 of his strength before he heard the crack of breaking bones. The hunters behind him were even more shocked. They could not believe that an unknown nobody like Hyun-woo could deal with the rats so easily. After moving around for a while, Hyun-woo confirmed that these level 17 rats were even weaker than the level 15 corpse-eating rats in hell. In that case, the boss standing over there probably wasn't too much for him to handle either, right? Still, everything should proceed according to plan. Hyun-woo had already drawn up a battle strategy. He used the domination ability he had become proficient with to control that pack of low-level rats. But they were too weak. They could not even withstand the power of the skill. At that moment, the werewolf could no longer stand still. It advanced toward Hyun-woo step by step. The branch chief was in utter panic and immediately ordered the entire hunter team back into position. In contrast to his urgency, Hyun-woo was completely relaxed. He did not even bother taking out a weapon and intended to fight barehanded. The werewolf let out a long howl, while Hyunwoo broke into a delighted smile. That's right, these were the kind of opponents he needed to face. Only then could he test whether all his brutal training in hell had paid off. "Hey," the branch chief shouted. "Don't underestimate it. You'll get yourself killed." Before he could even finish, he froze, dumbstruck by the scene that had just unfolded. Hyunwoo was still standing there arrogantly, without losing so much as a hair, while the werewolf had already collapsed to the ground. Unbelievable. That level 28 monster had been taken down by the young man in just 2 moves. Everything happened too quickly. All they saw was the werewolf thrust its sharp claws toward Hyunwoo, but he lightly blocked it with one hand, then returned the favor with a punch, straight into its stomach. The werewolf buckled in pain from the blow. Taking that opportunity, Hyunwoo followed up with another kick. The result was what everyone saw. With only those 2 strikes, he had left his opponent flattened on the ground. "Hey!" Hyunwoo stepped 1 foot onto its chest and spoke in a provocative tone. "Don't die so soon." After being beaten like that, the werewolf knew well enough that Hyunwoo was far above it. It hurriedly wagged its tail, begging for its life. The people around them were even more shocked. The boss monster of the Jeonju dungeon was now so afraid of death that it had to wag its tail to curry favor with an unknown hunter. Just who is he? Does anyone know him? The hunters under branch chief, Hapsong-song, asked one another in confusion. No one knew him. They had never seen a monster act like that before. Was it some kind of skill of his? In truth, it was only natural for those hunters to wonder. After all, whether monsters were stronger or weaker than humans, they always maintained a hostile attitude. But those rat men, and even their boss, were afraid of Hyunwoo as though he were the real monster. By now, Hyunwoo had beaten the werewolf to his heart's content. He kicked it far away, clicking his tongue as he complained that beating up the weak was no fun at all. To think the boss of a dungeon would be tormented to this extent. The werewolf felt utterly humiliated. It jumped over the wall, intending to flee back into the dungeon. But Hyunwoo had no intention of letting it have its way. He took out a hell dart refined from soot, then threw it with precise aim. The dart lodged directly in the werewolf's nape, causing it to fall headfirst to the ground from its leaping posture, as if it had been knocked out of the air. Everyone thought things had ended there, but no one expected Hyunwoo to enjoy challenging himself this much. He had tampered with that hell dart, so it no longer had the effect of finishing off the opponent. On the contrary, after being hit by the dart, the werewolf was strengthened instead. Its newly transformed appearance plunged the hunters into despair once again. Look at those muscles. Even its howl was far fiercer than before. They had not been able to beat it before it was strengthened, and now there was even less hope. At that moment, 2 more black wolves suddenly appeared behind the now-evolved wolf boss. It turned out there was not only one werewolf in the dungeon. This was bad. This was definitely a disaster. But it was only a disaster in their eyes, because Hyunwoo still had a vicious move up his sleeve. Facing the wolf that had evolved to level 38 in the blink of an eye, he was not afraid at all. Instead, he was excited. If he had encountered this level in hell, he would definitely have run for his life. But there was an enormous gap in strength between reality and hell. Come on, I'll let you taste what true strength really is. Hyunwoo activated the bloodthirst effect. For a short time, both his speed and strength soared, and he also gained a temporary blood draining skill. Hyunwoo now looked every bit as terrifying as a monster, perhaps even more frightening than the werewolf itself. At that moment, his opponent leaped. Its sharp claws once again aimed straight at Hyunwoo and struck toward him. "No!" the hunter screamed. With a boom, a violent impact rang out. Hyunwoo once again lightly blocked its attack with his hand. The werewolf used its other arm to strike again, but Hyunwoo stopped it with another single motion. Has your bloodlust made you lose all reason? Your attacks are too thoughtless. You just got beaten to a pulp, yet you still don't know fear. The werewolf was now furious to the point of madness. It howled long and wildly to intimidate him. As it happened, Hyunwoo was also itching to move and wanted a truly satisfying fight. He raised his fist, intending to completely bring his opponent down. But the 2 newly arrived black wolves had now joined the fight as well. The 3 of them took turns attacking Hyunwoo, making the situation even more chaotic. Oh, nice to meet you, comrades. Fighting you is much more fun than dealing with those small fries. Hyun-woo was extremely excited, and every exchange was lively. But in the eyes of the hunters, he was clearly gambling with his life. They felt that Hyun-woo was sacrificing himself to pave the way for their work. Yet all they could do was stand frozen in fear. This was clearly a humiliation for the noble profession of hunters. Meanwhile, Hyun-woo was still thoroughly enjoying the process of beating up the three wolves. Unfortunately, their level was still too low, not enough to satisfy him. Hey, you're all still going all out, right? Try a little harder and show me something worth watching. The level 38 werewolf threw a punch. Just as Hyun-woo dodged it, he saw another figure appear. It was one of the hunters brought by Branch Chief Hapsong-song. He could not bear the disgrace of being a cowardly hunter who only stood still in fear. So he decided to rush in and lend Hyun-woo a hand. Hey, are you still all right over there? He asked Hyun-woo worriedly. But he never expected that the only response he would receive was Hyun-woo's razor-sharp gaze, filled with fury. Just one look at it was enough to send a chill through anyone. The hunter's hair stood on end from Hyun-woo's stare. He did not understand why the young man was showing such a vicious expression. And it did not stop with that friendly look. Hyun-woo even aimed straight at him and threw a punch. Damn it, was he being hit for helping someone? The hunter seemed unable to dodge in time. But in the end, Hyun-woo's loving fist did not make contact with his face. Instead, it landed directly on the werewolf that had been about to ambush him from behind. What a scare. After giving it a heaven-sent blow, Hyun-woo nimbly jumped over the hunter's shoulder. He grabbed the wolf's tongue tightly as a foothold, then kicked with all his strength. The scene that followed was drenched in blood and utterly gruesome. The werewolf's body could not withstand the blow, and its head and body were immediately separated. When one of the remaining two gray wolves saw this, it howled in fury. Originally, it had been dealing with another team of hunters. But with the situation changing like that, it angrily turned around and charged toward Hyun-woo. Holding the white wolf's head in his hand, Hyun-woo showed no mercy at all. Oh, was this your family or friend? Of course, if the white wolf could not defeat him, how could this gray wolf possibly be his match? One punch from Hyun-woo froze the monster's movements. The hunters quickly seized that opportunity. They used all kinds of weapons to dismember the monster, ensuring it had no chance to get back up. Although the scene was chaotic, somewhat nauseating, and everyone was exhausted, they had won. More precisely, Hyun-woo had made the greatest contribution in helping them successfully hold off the boss of the Jeonju dungeon. After the werewolves died, Hapsong-song's hunters once again froze stiff. They stared blankly at Hyun-woo. Even now, they still could not believe that this lanky, skinny young man was the one who had knocked down all three boss monsters. What are you all standing there like statues for? The monster wave isn't over yet. Another pack of rat men is about to appear, so reorganize the vanguard line. Only when Hyun-woo impatiently shouted like that did they stop looking at him with foolish expressions. The hunters hurriedly reorganized their ranks, preparing to face the next wave of ratmen. Hyun-woo raised his face. Above his head was a sky full of glittering stars. It seemed about an hour and a half had passed. This could be considered Hyun-woo's debut battle. Though he was not particularly tired, he did not know how effective it had been. "Excuse me, young man." Hearing the call, Hyun-woo turned his head. It was the first hunter who had rushed up to help him fight the werewolves. Seeing Hyun-woo respond, the man quickly smiled, revealing a completely bald head. "I am Co. Tae-kyung, leader of the Gangbuk district of the All-Purpose Lotus." Hyun-woo silently assessed him. He had heard that the overall standard of hunters belonging to the All-Purpose Lotus was fairly low, but a district leader would not be too bad. The man in front of him was probably in the top 10% in the country. Originally, Hyun-woo did not think much of Co. Tae-kyung, but after a quick glance, Hyun-woo hurriedly took the hand he was offering and replied politely. "The situation just now was quite dangerous, but thanks to your support, I was able to survive. Thank you very much." Co. Tae-kyung broke out in a cold sweat. He did not understand why Hyun-woo was reacting like this. Just now, that young man alone had clearly been more than capable of blowing those werewolves away. So why was he acting grateful to him? Was this some kind of test? But very quickly, Co. Tae-kyung realized the reason. Flashing camera lights were shining on the two of them. The reporter stationed at the scene had just arrived and captured the entire handshake between him and Hyun-woo. The dangerous situation has been resolved, and District Leader Co. Tae-kyung is currently taking command of the scene. At present, he is shaking hands with the hunter who delivered the most impressive performance here. After that, all attention focused on Hyunwoo. May I ask which guild you belong to? Did you know in advance about the werewolf's ability to mutate? Earlier, we saw you charge alone into the middle of the monster horde. What were you thinking when you did that? It was Hyunwoo's first time facing so many cameras, microphones, and reporters, but he was not nervous at all. This had all been part of his plan. Hyunwoo cleared his throat, then began answering the interview. Hello, everyone. I am Kong Hyunwoo. Although I'm only a nameless rookie hunter, I will do my very best for everyone's safety. Under the ceaseless flashes of light, Hyunwoo's mood brightened a little. This feeling was not bad. His past of wandering through orphanages and the long days of crawling through underground sewers to search for phosphorescent crystals were truly over. But this was only the beginning. The future would definitely become even brighter. News about Kong Hyunwoo quickly flooded every information channel. His abilities were even featured on programs for hunter ability researchers to analyze. Comments about him also filled social media. But with humanity's current understanding, they could not fully analyze Hyunwoo's abilities, and that was not difficult to understand. After all, effects like domination and bloodthirst were things he had obtained from hell. How could people like them possibly know about the existence of stars? Professors and researchers all concluded that Hyunwoo was a major unknown. They explained his combat process by claiming that Hyunwoo had simultaneously used physical enhancement, acceleration, and psychological suppression skills. The most obvious example was when Hyunwoo dealt with the rats. Was it really possible to use multiple skills at the same time like that? Although most skills were innate, there was also a very small possibility of obtaining them as rewards after clearing a dungeon. There were also rumors that when one stood on the brink of life and death, one could specialize into a new skill. But no matter what skill he possessed, I am certain it is high grade. Perhaps it is some kind of skill that suppresses others for a fixed period of time. I believe it is something extremely rare that only hunters who have reached level 50 can obtain, the so-called ultimate title. But at present, the only people in our country officially confirmed to possess an ultimate title are Lee Ji-tae and Commander Eod-sung, correct? The people on the television program continued their lively analysis. Laboratory Director Jo Won-kyung watched every second without missing a moment. After the program ended, she only uttered one sentence with contempt. You ignorant fools are all wrong. They had not realized the key issue. Hyunwoo had not used a skill. That domination effect was already present within his body. In other words, Hyunwoo's very existence itself suppressed the Ratmen. Jo Won-kyung had witnessed similar scenes several times in side dungeons. She was even more certain that Hyunwoo's existence was no different from that of a monster. After all, only monsters could suppress other species through their mere presence. A woman's intuition was truly something mysterious. And Jo Won-kyung was also a scientist. For that reason, she trusted her own judgment even more. Judging from the reaction of the Ratmen, Hyunwoo's bloodline was extremely close to that of monsters. Jo Won-kyung had a terrible headache. This was the first time in her entire scientific career that she had encountered such a bizarre case. At that moment, there was a knock at the office door. Director Joe's subordinate entered with a phone in hand and a frightened expression on his face. This immediately irritated her. Hey, Lee Si-won, I told you not to disturb me. Do you know I even removed the SIM card from my phone? Lee Si-won was extremely troubled. Of course, he knew how frightening his boss became when she was angry. But the person on the other end of the line was stubbornly insisting on speaking with Jo Won-kyung no matter what. He said you would know who he is immediately if I mentioned the Bravo Hotel. You're telling me to take a call from some hotel, from someone we know absolutely nothing about? Jo Won-kyung's anger rose higher and higher. It seems the call came from the Blue House. Only then did Jo Won-kyung reluctantly answer the phone. On the other end was a very composed man. After a brief greeting, he introduced himself as Director Park Secretary Kyo. When Jo Won-kyung heard that name, her expression grew even uglier. Ah, you bastard. Long time no see. It seemed the other domestic powers had caught the scent faster than Jo Won-kyung had expected. Sure enough, the person Park Ki-woo mentioned next was the rising hunter who had stepped forward to stop the monster wave. It was none other than Hyunwoo. In truth, the Blue House had no particular interest in adventurers like him. The one who truly could no longer sit still was the Daesung Good. Because the Sejong Laboratory had still not released the hunter ranking results after that assessment, they were extremely impatient, especially since Hyun-woo, who was emerging like a phenomenon, had also taken part in that exam. As I said, we do not know much about Kang Hyun-woo. The hunter rank evaluation machine broke down recently, so there are no results yet. Naturally, Jo Won-kyung did not want to reveal too much about the precious gem she had just collected, so she continued playing dumb. But Park Hee-woo was the Blue House secretary, so he was not someone easy to deceive. Enough joking around. Act professionally. Do not think I do not know you are deliberately delaying the ranking announcement. Do not tell me Sejong Laboratory is trying to recruit Kang Hyun-woo for that project you are working on. Park Hee-woo was indeed sharp. Since he already knew everything, Jo Won-kyung had no reason to keep hiding it. She frankly admitted what he had just said. While she was at it, she confirmed once again that she would absolutely not leak Kang Hyun-woo's results. But the ranking results from that test would have to be announced sooner or later. Otherwise, Jo Won-kyung and her laboratory would receive extremely harsh criticism. Park Hee-woo did not give up and continued bargaining. They only wanted to know the results a few days in advance. The Taesung Guild said they want to donate $10 billion to the Hunter Retirement Fund that Sejong Laboratory opened. Although at first they had not planned to pay that much, the amount had now increased considerably. $10 billion was not a small sum. Moreover, Taesung's reputation in Korea was beyond question. Jo Won-kyung hesitated greatly. If she continued refusing now, she would definitely run into trouble. Furthermore, she might also lose Kang Hyun-woo to the government and Taesung. On this side, Park Hee-woo was feeling extremely smug. As expected, after struggling with herself for a while, Jo Won-kyung had to surrender. Fine, I will send you the information file. Do not be too surprised. After seeing that scene, nothing can surprise me anymore. Sometimes when I think about those people being right near me, I get goosebumps. They need collars around their necks. Jo Won-kyung disliked the way someone from the Blue House spoke about adventurers. She sent the information file to Park Hee-woo and quickly hung up. Park Hee-woo triumphantly forwarded this file to Taesung. He was certain he would receive a hefty sum after helping that guild gather important information when a new message arrived. You failed to carry out the agreement properly. I will end this here. What? He had clearly sent the file, so why had it become a failure to carry out the agreement? Sensing something was wrong, Park Hee-woo hurriedly grabbed the television remote and turned on the news. At that exact moment, the broadcast was reporting fresh breaking news. Sejong Laboratory had just announced the results of the new Hunter Ability ranking evaluation. At this moment, Park Hee-woo could no longer laugh. The veins on his forehead twitched. Jo Won-kyung was truly a cunning woman. She had actually released the results directly to the public, refusing to let him benefit from them. Park Hee-woo was so furious that he knocked over the wine glass in his hand. After that, he repeatedly greeted Jo Won-kyung's parents and ancestors with extremely vulgar language. Meanwhile, Hyun-woo had just finished showering. He walked into the bedroom and saw Rumin focused on watching the news. The program hosts were all directing their discussion toward him. According to the published ranking results, Hyun-woo had reached 5 stars. We do not know whether the announcement that he has achieved a 5-star rank is trustworthy, but Sejong's rank evaluations have never been wrong. There have been many cases of hunters rising in rank, but no one has ever risen by more than 3 stars before. Ranking up is not the issue, but each rank has a limit. At 1 star, that limit is level 20. After that, with each rank increase, the level limit rises by 10 levels. Theoretically, the limit for 5 stars is level 60, but a gap of 10 levels is quite large. That means he is even stronger than the strongest hunters in the entire country, including Lee Ji-tae and Park De-yoon. The arguments on the news still showed no sign of stopping. They were not only surprised by Hyun-woo's rank, but also extremely interested in his skills. Judging by this achievement, it seems he is on par with Lee Ji-tae. But where was someone like that hiding before? This test was only conducted a few months ago. Hyun-woo lay on the bed, feeling extremely pleased as he watched the media focus all its attention on him. Rumin also told him that her phone had been ringing off the hook these past few days. Aside from recruitment offers, people had invited Hyun-woo to appear on reality shows and film advertisements as well. Indeed, once you became famous, no matter what ridiculous thing you did, there would be people willing to pay you for it. Hyun-woo had little interest in such vanity. The stocks he had bought a few days earlier were continuously falling in price, making Rumin extremely worried. But Hyunwoo was not worried. After all, he already knew how the future would unfold. Rumin, gather everything we have and buy Taesung's shares. What? Rumin thought she had misheard and hurriedly tried to advise Hyunwoo against it. Although Taesung's shares had fallen less after that monster wave, they still had the northern expedition coming up. Taesung would definitely avoid losses as much as possible, but he was sure Lee Ji-tae had already started acting. After all, that was exactly the kind of person he was. That evening, Park Lee-soo came to Hyunwoo's villa. The two of them walked through the forest for a while. Park Lee-soo was an extremely capable person. In a short time, he had created a perfect new identity for Hyunwoo. It was that of a young businessman who had spent many years overseas and used resources he had gathered himself to create jobs for hunters. After returning to Korea, he had started again from the bottom and saw the true state of the dungeon industry. Hyunwoo was extremely satisfied. This fake identity was even more perfect than he had expected. Hyunwoo walked a few steps ahead of Park Lee-soo, then suddenly felt that something was not quite right. The moment he turned his head, he saw the old man's cane cutting through the air toward him. With the title Strongest in Hell, Hyunwoo's blocking effect was very high. Therefore, his swift reaction ability helped him dodge the attack in time. Park Lee-soo did not seem to be merely trying to frighten him, because this move clearly contained killing intent. What is this? Did you cause a monster wave? Haha, I think you already know the answer. Hyunwoo knew he could not hide it from Park Lee-soo's eyes, so he did not intend to gloss over it. You reckless brat. What were you planning to do if something terrible happened? Park Lee-soo's cane struck again and again. He was extremely furious at Hyunwoo's dirty debut stunt. I did not cause anything beyond my control. I did not even use my full strength. I stopped everything without causing any casualties, didn't I? You summoned monsters and caused a whole pile of danger. What was your goal? Were you trying to raise your own value, or was it vanity and fame? Park Lee-soo had drawn a sword from the sheath hidden in his cane. He had always thought highly of this young man, but what Hyunwoo had just done involved too many risks and affected innocent people. This made Park Lee-soo extremely angry. Hyunwoo also drew his own weapon. It seemed that today, neither side would stop unless they fought properly. Both Hyunwoo's new sword and gauntlets were good equipment. At the very least, they were much better than what he had during his previous duel with Park Lee-soo. But the old man's sword was no ordinary weapon either. The proof was that it did not suffer the slightest damage, even when clashing against Hyunwoo's weapon. However, whether a sword was good or not was not as important as the quality of the person wielding it. Although Hyunwoo had gathered a whole pile of skills and effects in hell, in terms of swordsmanship experience, he still could not compare to his opponent. After a period of back-and-forth struggle, Park Lee-soo clearly overwhelmed the young man. You have improved compared to before, but today I need to bring you down here. What are you planning to do, old man? The monster wave in Jeonju was something that was going to happen no matter what. I merely adjusted the timing so that it would happen at the right moment. What? Are you ignoring the lives that would have been lost because of it? I made sure no one died, and stopping it at the right time was a good thing, wasn't it? Although his reasoning was persuasive, Park Lee-soo still could not accept it. He believed Hyunwoo had only stopped the monster wave for fame. If there had been no benefit in return, Hyunwoo would definitely have stood by and watched. But Hyunwoo also found it strange. This old man had always been best at doing business. So why was he so devoted to worrying about the public today? In any case, if Park Lee-soo refused to listen to his persuasion, then the two of them would truly have to settle this with their fists today. Sorry in advance. I honestly did not want to use the equipment you gave me like this. On Park Lee-soo's hand was the ring named Yuhasa's Faith, which Hyunwoo had given him before. This item temporarily doubled the owner's senses. Park Lee-soo's speed and reactions had already been very fast, not like an old man's at all. With that ring added in, he became even more frighteningly fast. Combined with his swordsmanship, he repeatedly gave Hyunwoo a beating. Although Hyunwoo was the one who had given him the ring, this speed truly still stunned him. However, the protagonist was still the protagonist. No matter how strong Park Lee-soo was, how could he match Kang Hyunwoo's protagonist aura? After taking enough of a beating, the young man decided to end the fight. Park Lee-soo still thought he had the upper hand, but he never imagined that he would be knocked down by Hyun-woo just like that. If you could see that I had improved, you should also have guessed how much stronger I would be in actual combat. Park Lee-soo supported himself on his sword, panting with difficulty. Even though his senses had doubled, he had not realized that Hyun-woo had poisoned him long ago. Furthermore, it was a deadly poison. When the two subordinates saw their boss defeated, they hurriedly rushed over. Hyun-woo summoned Kirsten. It brought two more subordinates with it and charged toward Park Lee-soo's two underlings. I thought we trusted each other. It is truly a shame that things turned out like this. Hyun-woo withdrew the arm guard, revealing the other ring paired with Yuhas's faith. His earlier calculation had not been wrong. Thanks to this item, Park Lee-soo had completely fallen under Hyun-woo's surveillance and control. The old man lay flat on the ground, his limbs stiff, unable to move anymore. Hyun-woo raised the sword in his hand. "Sorry, but I have decided." The blade in his hand decisively stabbed down. Park Lee-soo had only enough strength left to let out one more cry. His hand trembled continuously and then stopped completely. Kirsten's group looked in this direction for a long time, not knowing what to say. Even Hyun-woo revealed an expression of reluctance. "Boss, what should we do with these guys?" "Kill them." Kirsten pointed at the two subordinates. "No, you all withdraw. I still have private matters to settle with this old man." After Kirsten's group dragged the two men away, Hyun-woo stood there blankly for a long time before speaking. "Hey, old man, the show is over. Get up." Park Lee-soo's hand moved slightly, and then he stood up with difficulty, as if nothing had happened at all. The poison Hyun-woo had put into his body had a rather interesting property. It was dangerous to enemies, but quite useful to allies. And the power over life and death lay entirely in Hyun-woo's hands. "I am truly very surprised, but why did you spare me?" "Well, I also thought you never intended to kill me. If you had, you would not have come to find me personally." "Kong Hyun-woo, although you always act arrogant and brutal, I know your heart is very kind. But sometimes you make the wrong decisions yourself, so I am very concerned. I will not bother correcting you, but as you saw, I am not a monster." Park Lee-soo was indeed a heavyweight businessman. Or, to put it more crudely, he was a cold-blooded underworld boss. But he also had his own principles, namely love for humanity. It was a rule he would protect to the very end, even if the entire world collapsed. That was why, when he learned that the monster wave had been caused single-handedly by Hyun-woo, Park Lee-soo had been extremely worried. Hyun-woo, however, did not possess anything like Park Lee-soo's noble love for humanity. In his eyes, there were only two types of lovable people. One was useful people who stood on his side, and the other was stupid enemies. To be honest, Hyun-woo disliked useless people or enemies who were too intelligent, because then the struggle would encounter many obstacles. Park Lee-soo believed that with such enormous power, Hyun-woo should recognize his duty to protect the weak. But in Hyun-woo's dictionary, there was no such concept as duty. In the past, when he had first gotten money, he had only wanted to live an upper-class life and have status. But recently, Hyun-woo had come to think that this alone was not enough. He could not be satisfied living a life with only this level of power. "Not only am I searching for stars, I even have the desire to become a star myself." Park Lee-soo had long known that Hyun-woo was not a simple person. However, his ambition was truly too great. So great that the old man could no longer grasp it. The segment for sharing dreams and ambitions was over. Next came the victor's demonstration of power. Hyun-woo would not kill Park Lee-soo, because he knew that no matter how many times Park Lee-soo tried, the old man would never be able to kill him. That is why I told you before. If you had honestly promised to obey me back then, words alone would have been enough. But if you left it until next time, you would have to kneel and swear loyalty to me. Meanwhile, the people of Crimson Butterfly had finally made their comeback. Both the red-haired woman and the muscular woman maintained their form, and were even much stronger than when they had fought Hyun-woo during the previous assessment. They were currently facing a boss of the snail race inside a dungeon. Aside from the Crimson Butterfly group, quite a few other adventurers had also formed teams with them. However, when facing the Snail Chieftain, only this red-haired woman dared to charge forward alone and confront it first. "Crimson Butterfly, stop! Even for you, facing it is too," the party commander shouted worriedly. But before he could finish saying the word dangerous, the other three members of Crimson Butterfly charged forward at the same time. The red-haired woman took the initiative to launch an attack, and when the snail was distracted, the muscular woman made her move and seized its weapon. The frail-looking young man in the group was responsible for using a skill to suppress the opponent's mind. Once the snail had lost the ability to resist, the red-haired woman rushed in and delivered the finishing blow. No one could clearly see her strike, but immediately afterward, the snail's enormous body was sliced to pieces. Normally, their group should have been cheered after such a magnificent performance. But that commander instead came right up to Crimson Butterfly and scolded her harshly. "Hey, why did you ignore the commander's instructions? Do you want the disciplinary committee to step in because you disobeyed orders?" The other members of the group did not take this commander seriously at all, because his ability might not even be half of theirs. Seeing one being scolded, the others all spoke up to refute him. Their momentum immediately scared the commander into silence. But right at that moment, the red-haired woman once spoke up in confusion and apologized. "You are right. I ignored your instructions. My actions could have endangered my teammates. I am truly sorry, and I willingly accept any punishment." One even bowed her head very sincerely. Seeing her like that, the commander naturally could not criticize her any further, especially when her three teammates were all looking at him with bullet-like gazes full of affection. "I'm also sorry for speaking harshly because I was in a bad mood, but it was an honor to see you suppress the snail chieftain with a single blow. Thanks to you, we were able to complete our mission here without suffering any casualties. Very impressive." He held out his hand, wanting to shake one's hand in friendship, but she kept her head lowered, feeling extremely uneasy inside. The commander's scolding from earlier had left one with a lot to think about. The commander kept holding out his hand, but when she did not respond, he was left completely embarrassed. Awkwardly, he withdrew his hand and turned away, inwardly judging this girl to be far too arrogant. In truth, though, one was simply busy overthinking. After they left the dungeon, Li Jite was already waiting there in a gleaming white suit. It seemed he had also put a great deal of effort into the Crimson Butterfly group, especially one. "Congratulations. I heard you've reached level 21. It was all thanks to the support of my team members and the Taesung Guild," one replied very humbly. "I'm very proud of you. However, there is something I would like to discuss with you privately. Would that be all right?" One was somewhat wary of the proposal. In the end, however, she agreed. The two of them talked inside Li Jite's private car. When he learned that she was in low spirits because of what had happened in the dungeon earlier, he even encouraged her very enthusiastically. It appeared that Li Jite was not even trying to hide the fact that he was currying favor with one. After all, she was a rare gem that was difficult to find. Moving on to the main subject, Li Jite handed one a tablet. Inside was apparently a clip recording part of the battle that had just taken place in the Jianja dungeon. During that time, one had been training in other dungeons the whole time, so she knew nothing about it. After watching the clip, she could only stare wide-eyed and slack-jawed, stammering so badly that she could not speak. Is this a monster wave? And this person is Kong Hyun-woo? That's right, that is Hunter Kong Hyun-woo. We're trying to find out every piece of information we can about him, but there's almost no news at all. The Taesung Guild, and especially Li Jite, had never given up their ambition regarding Hyun-woo. That was why they were doing everything they could to make the investigation into him useful. Li Jite had come to one because she was someone who had directly faced Hyun-woo before. Furthermore, the fight between the two of them had lasted more than 30 minutes. What do you think? Back then, was he hiding his talent and going easy on you? One lowered her head, and the memory of her duel with Hyun-woo at that time surfaced vividly once more. That was the first time she had ever lost so miserably, and tears rolled down her face beyond her control. He was definitely hiding something. Whether it was martial arts or abilities, I was stronger. But in the end, I experienced an illusion. During that time, I was suppressed. Hearing her say this, Li Jite grew even more curious. It made him even more certain that Hyun-woo possessed an illusion-inducing skill, but had not used it. There must have been a limit to that skill's use, or he was deliberately hiding something. But if so, that is truly strange. In this clip, it looks as though he only used physical ability to suppress his opponents. Li Jite had watched the clip countless times. Hyun-woo had clearly used only his fists and had even taken down a werewolf in a single move. This was not something a newcomer like him should have been able to do. Crimson Butterfly, surely you think the same as I do, don't you? This is far too strange. One fell even more silent. Just from this clip, she could clearly see how much Hyunwoo had improved. The fact that he had made such a tremendous leap in only a few months made her feel even more disappointed in herself. Lee Ji-tae understood women's psychology very well. Just from that expression, he quickly spoke up to reassure her. Don't be sad. You have also been developing very well. You have surpassed the level of an apprentice hunter. Both of you are extraordinarily remarkable, to the point that you are even stronger than I was when I was an apprentice. These ordinary pleasantries could not cheer one up. Lee Ji-tae still wanted to make use of her, because he believed that at the present moment, she was the only person who understood Hyunwoo best. But one refused, because everything she knew about Hyunwoo was limited to only the 30 minutes of their previous fight. Even so, Lee Ji-tae did not give up. Somehow, he had found out that one wanted to conquer the Jeonja dungeon. Coincidentally, the Taesung Guild was preparing an exploration team to subjugate it. They wanted to use Jeonju as an opportunity to refine the hunter's skills, while also gathering as much information as possible about the dungeon where the monster wave had occurred. That would serve as the foundation for next year's expedition to raid the Bichu dungeon in the north. Crimson Butterfly, you have only just surpassed level 20. You do not have much experience with high-ranking dungeons, let alone flow-type dungeons. At present, dealing with the Jeonja dungeon would be very difficult for you. However, Taesung and I believe in you. This was clearly recruitment in the form of a friendly invitation. What Lee Ji-tae wanted to say was very clear. One was currently not capable of conquering Jeonju, but if she wanted to, he and Taesung would support her with all their strength. Of course, the price one would have to pay was helping him gather information on Kang Hyunwoo. When one returned, her 3 teammates were still waiting for her. They had also just caught up on the news about the monster wave in the Jeonja dungeon. It seemed the muscular woman had still not forgotten her old grudge against Hyunwoo. The proof was that as soon as she saw one, she bombarded her with questions. Sis, it was that bastard, wasn't it? Kang Hyunwoo. It was him. One did not deny that Hyunwoo was the person in the clip. She also told them that the Taesung Guild was forming a team to conquer the Jeonja dungeon, and that she had just received an invitation. Just as Lee Ji-tae wanted, one did not refuse the offer. Her teammates were also very happy to see their leader receive such an opportunity to grow. One did not harbor any hostility or resentment toward Hyunwoo, but she had always regarded him as a goal. Especially after watching the clip and seeing how strong he had become, she became even more determined to grow stronger herself. I will surpass you no matter what. On the way back, Lee Ji-tae kept fondling a phosphorescent crystal. Even though he was an internationally ranked hunter, he could not deny that this was the first time he had ever seen a crystal of such high purity. The curiosity about Hyunwoo in his mind grew even stronger. At present, Lee Ji-tae's greatest desire was surely to uncover all the secrets Hyunwoo was hiding. Halfway through the trip, a call came in. The person on the other end reported that preparations for tomorrow had been completed. I understand. After hanging up, Lee Ji-tae smiled comfortably. It seemed he was very eager for the event that would take place tomorrow. That event was a large-scale press conference. From early on, a great many reporters from television stations of all sizes had poured in. Camera flashes filled the room. Anyone who did not know what was going on might have thought Lee Ji-tae was a K-pop idol. As for Lee Ji-tae, who was already very used to the media, he did not feel the slightest bit nervous. He bluntly accepted responsibility for the monster wave that had occurred some time ago, even though the Taesung Guild had absolutely no duty to protect this area. After that, Lee Ji-tae also announced that Taesung would soon launch an expedition with the goal of conquering the Jeonja dungeon, and naturally, they would not request sponsorship from any financial source. Many people were focused on the live broadcast, including Rumin and Park Lee-soo. Park Lee-soo could not help admiring Lee Ji-tae's style. Originally, responsibility for the monster wave should have been placed on All-Purpose Lotus. But if Taesung stepped forward to accept responsibility and shielded All-Purpose Lotus, then they could openly take control of Jeonju. After the expedition, Taesung could monopolize all the items and monster corpses inside. And now, I would like to invite the strongest person seated in the front row onto the stage. The cameras all turned toward the direction Lee Ji-tae had just mentioned. Park Lee-soo, Rumin, and even one who was training diligently in the practice room were startled when they heard this name. Yes, please welcome Hunter Kang Hyunwoo to the stage. With me, Having reached this step, both Lee Ji-tae and Hyun-woo had their own calculations in mind. The power Hyun-woo had displayed had successfully attracted Lee Ji-tae's attention. This invitation to cooperate, naturally, did not contain the slightest sincerity. As for Hyun-woo, he knew very well that the other party had not yet been able to find a reason for his terrifying power, and was therefore approaching him step by step. Now, Lee Ji-tae, the only thing you can do is cast aside your pride. Continue using the phosphorescent crystals I provide to level up and long for me, the one living in this hell. After the press conference came an internal meeting among the hunters. There, Hyun-woo met an old acquaintance again. It was No Hoon, a high-ranking executive of the Hoen Mama Guild, one of the 3 largest guilds in Korea. She was the person who had once fought Kirsten during Hyun-woo's first dungeon expedition in the real world at Park Isu's request. If you do not remember, go back to the channel and rewatch part 1. No Hoon was dressed very simply, with a rough, casual style, just like usual. When she arrived at the party and saw everyone wearing glossy, formal clothes, she felt somewhat out of place. Then, when Hyun-woo appeared, that sense of awkwardness increased even more. That was because this normally sloppy young man was also wearing a suit today, his hair styled back in a romantic way like an actor. Compared to Lee Ji-tae, Hyun-woo was not inferior in the slightest today. Long time no see. Yes. No Hoon stammered for a while, unable to stop herself from voicing a compliment. You look really different from that time in the dungeon. Hyun-woo was, of course, very happy to be praised. This love-struck young man also did not forget to brag that he looked so sharp today, all thanks to his girlfriend helping him choose his outfit. Not only did he have a decent appearance, Hyun-woo had also fully mastered social etiquette. It was all thanks to the supporter's skill, which helped him observe and imitate people's behavior. Actually, I should have dressed comfortably like you. As soon as Hyun-woo said this, No Hoon felt irritated. Usually, gatherings between hunters were rather noisy and relaxed. Only when Lee Ji-tae organized an event did things become this stiff and serious. Looking around, No Hoon was the shabbiest among all the guests. No Hoon reached out and took a glass of wine from a waiter. Hyun-woo continued using his skill to start a conversation. Seeing you here, I suppose Hoen Mama is participating in this expedition too? No. No Hoon answered with absolute certainty. Because it is Taesung, Hoen Mama will not participate in any subjugation expedition. I came here only to deliver a message. Hyun-woo had also heard a few rumors that the relationship between the 2 guilds was not very good. Seeing No Hoon's attitude today, he became certain that what he had heard was not merely rumor. She kept openly mocking Lee Ji-tae and those parasites clinging to him. The guild master of Hoen Mama did not even want to see his face. That was the reason No Hoon had appeared here today. Hyun-woo carefully observed the person before him, feeling a little regretful inside. Although Hoen Mama was one of the 3 largest guilds in Korea, their current status was no longer what it had once been. He thought to himself that if they were reborn, they would definitely become the #1 guild in Korea. If he could draw both No Hoon and the guild master over his allies, nothing could be better. The 2 of them chatted casually for a while, and then Lee Ji-tae arrived. He gave a greeting and introduction just as seen earlier. But before introducing Hyun-woo, Lee Ji-tae also introduced 3 other people. Among them was a man dressed like a priest, and Hyun-woo paid close attention to him. According to the introduction, the command team for this Jeonju subjugation consisted of the following people. First was CO Tae-kyung, the Gangbuk branch chief of All-Purpose Lotus. The second person was named Kong-hoo, and though I am somewhat ashamed to say it, I, Lee Ji-tae, will take on the role of overall commander. No Hoon was so angry that she ground her teeth, because Lee Ji-tae had completely ignored her existence, despite her being the representative of Hoen Mama, and had even shamelessly seized the position of overall commander. No Hoon drained the glass of wine in her hand in one gulp, then made a loud sound that drew the attention of everyone nearby. Fine. I only came here to deliver the message that Hoen Mama will not be participating in this subjugation. I hope the rest of you enjoy wasting your time. After saying that, she walked straight out, even forgetting to say goodbye to Hyun-woo. The sound of her slamming the door was so loud that many of the guests jumped in surprise. Even Hyun-woo froze, not having expected the relationship between the 2 guilds to be that bad. After No Hoon left, his gaze returned to the stage. At that moment, Lee Ji-tae began introducing the remaining member of the command team, who was also one of the most important people. This is Father Johann Hessner from Germany. When a monster wave broke out in Syria, he risked his life to assist in the dungeon subjugation. This time, Father Johann has been invited to join the subjugation as a senior advisor. When he heard the name Johann Hessner, Hyun-woo's whole body stiffened. That was because he had seen this name in hell twice before. The first time was when he faced that monster Camaro. It had mentioned him. The second was in the suicide note Hyun-woo had found in hell along with the memoir. Johann was the person who committed suicide after this incident, while the remnants of humanity were like a candle flickering in the wind. But a priest committing suicide? Hyun-woo felt it made no sense. However, he did not have the energy to care too much. All he knew was that this man would be directly connected to humanity's survival in the near future. While he was absorbed in thought, Hyun-woo's gaze suddenly met Lee Ji-tae's. Lee Ji-tae gave a slight nod, then continued introducing Father Johann. This man was a level 53 blessing mage. He was proficient in 3 skills: blessing, healing, and an ultimate skill called Benevolent Moon Annihilation. At that moment, one of Lee Ji-tae's subordinates came to find Hyun-woo. This movement attracted the attention of quite a few nearby guests. Look, that's Kang Hyun-woo. He looks really different from usual. That outfit suits him. I almost didn't even recognize him. The man invited Hyun-woo to follow him because someone wanted to meet him. Naturally, Hyun-woo would not refuse, because this was also the moment he had been waiting for all along. Hyun-woo followed the man to the top floor of the building. The room was luxurious, but there was not a single person in sight. No, of course there had to be someone there. Immediately afterward, Lee Ji-tae's voice rang out. Mr. Kang Hyun-woo, this way. Hyun-woo followed the voice up to the second floor of the penthouse. Lee Ji-tae had thoughtfully prepared wine and a table of food. Just as Hyun-woo took a sip of wine, he got straight to the point. Lee Ji-tae asked where Hyun-woo had trained and whether he was currently connected to any person or guild. Of course not. I just train alone. You can say that to me, but when the government starts investigating you, you had better give them a reasonable excuse. The government tends to grow anxious when things they cannot control keep happening. Hyun-woo had never intended to sit down and have a serious, proper conversation with this man. But unexpectedly, Lee Ji-tae's next question made him freeze. Mr. Kang Hyun-woo, which star's whisper did you hear? Hyun-woo wanted to play dumb, but Lee Ji-tae continued throwing out questions one after another. He then asked what Hyun-woo's current level was. Hyun-woo's sharp intuition told him that this man was extremely serious. Originally, Hyun-woo had already shown him enough during that monster wave. But if he still wanted to test him like this, then Hyun-woo would have no choice but to strike first. Yet, just as Hyun-woo turned his head, the effect of the strongest in hell activated. This was a signal that the other party was initiating hostile intent. Lee Ji-tae was displaying his power, including his level 57, and also the fact that his rank was 4 stars. It was as though Hyun-woo's battle switch had been stepped on. By instinct, he retreated backward, but Lee Ji-tae grabbed him firmly with one hand. There was no denying it. This bastard was far too strong. Don't worry, I didn't call you here to fight. Hyun-woo's hand was still being held tightly. Only after a while did Lee Ji-tae let go. A feeling of disappointment rose in his heart. If Hyun-woo belonged to the 5-star class, why had he been unable to resist at all just now? Mr. Kang Hyun-woo, are you truly someone who has reached 5 stars? Lee Ji-tae asked indifferently, as if belittling him. I'd like to ask you the same question. Lee Ji-tae had not expected Hyun-woo to ask him that in return. At that, he hurriedly put on an ingratiating smile, then explained that he had thought Hyun-woo's strength was even higher than 5 stars. You seem very different from the 5-star people I've met before. Hyun-woo silently studied the other man's expression. It seemed he was not lying, so there are already a few others who have reached 5 stars. Lee Ji-tae continued laying out his assumptions. He believed Hyun-woo had crossed some sort of limit. His rank might not stop at 5 stars. It might even be 6 or 7 stars. I do not know for certain, but there is one thing I am sure of. You have surpassed the current level of an ordinary human being. I'm not that strong. Hyun-woo let out a breath and modestly denied it, but inside, he felt extremely uncomfortable. He had to give Lee Ji-tae credit for his sharp intuition. This man's guesses were so accurate that it was irritating. At this rate, he would have to hide himself even more carefully so Li Jite could not dig up any more information. I'm certain you are very strong, but fine. I won't talk about that strength. This may be a little sudden, but do you know the autobiography Childhood's End, written by Arthur C. Clarke? Li Jite changed the subject so abruptly that Hyun-woo could not put on his helmet in time. The young man froze stiff, only able to answer that he did not know, while inwardly cursing Li Jite as a bastard about 7,749 times. Li Jite could not read his inner thoughts, however, and continued talking endlessly. In that book, there's a species called the Overlords. Their science and civilization are far more advanced than humanity's. Humans see them as demons and fear them. But in the end, humanity needs the Overlords' help in order to reach a new stage. Arthur compared the process of human development to that of a demon race. Though the story was not particularly popular, Li Jite found it wonderful. Hyun-woo, sitting beside him, still had not escaped his frozen state. As an orphan who had grown up in misery, burying his entire youth in the sewers searching for phosphorescent crystals, would he ever have had time to read a novel? Ignoring the scholarly disinterest of the person beside him, Li Jite remained immersed in the story he was telling. But in the novel, the Overlords can maintain their species until it evolves into a certain form. Although thousands of other species ended their stagnation by creating new evolutionary forms. In the end, they were all like us humans, always reaching for something better. So what? Hyun-woo finally could not hold back and spoke up. He had the feeling that if this fair-faced blonde man kept babbling about that novel, he would use every ounce of his strength to send him to meet his ancestors. I think that is rather similar to the ideological leaders and adventurers of today. Just like how many believers rejoiced when the Buddha entered nirvana. At that point, Li Jite suddenly leaned close to Hyun-woo like a wolf that had caught the scent of prey. I can say that the moment I saw you, I smelled that you were a cruel but cowardly person. You possess the arrogance of those who may one day grasp their own fate. In that instant, Hyun-woo truly felt that Li Jite was too perceptive. Did he perhaps know about hell? But very soon, the words that followed swept that thought away. Li Jite simply believed Hyun-woo was the same type of person as himself, because he too was cruel and cowardly, and because he too could predict the future to some extent. Earth is undergoing many changes. The monster wave in Jeonju was only the beginning. In the future, the overall difficulty of dungeons will inevitably increase. Soon, countless changes will occur, and the future will gradually become difficult to predict. For that reason, Li Jite formally made a proposal. Do you think we should cooperate with each other? Like comrades who support one another when danger comes. Although I do not know how much scheming and wickedness you hide behind that human face, I still want to use it for my own benefit. Then, when you use your skills, do you chant spells out loud or call out the names of your skills? Li Jite was dazed for a moment because Hyun-woo's question seemed completely off topic. But afterward, he honestly answered that he had stopped doing that after turning 20. The two exchanged a few more words for quite some time. Then Li Jite excused himself and left first because he had something to do in the ballroom. Meanwhile, Hyun-woo was escorted downstairs by his subordinates. The moment Hyun-woo stepped out of the elevator, what lay before him was once again a ruined hell. Startled, Hyun-woo blinked several times, and before his eyes it turned back into an ordinary parking garage. It seemed his conversation with Li Jite had killed off a few of his neurons, so he was hallucinating in broad daylight like this. However, after this conversation, Hyun-woo became even more excited. The more Li Jite believed he could win, the more Hyun-woo wanted to stop his ambitions. Besides, if that man was one of the most talented people in the world, then Hyun-woo was even more convinced that he could grasp his intentions faster than expected. A few days later, Hyun-woo had to drag himself out to solo a giant spore rat whose entire body was packed with grotesque spore cores. As soon as it saw him, it growled, bared its saw-like sharp teeth, and charged straight at him like an arrow. Seeing it so eager to fight, Hyun-woo did not have the heart to interrupt its mood. He swiftly drew his sword, swung his arm, and slashed horizontally in one clean, overwhelmingly dominant stroke. After Hyun-woo's razor-sharp strike, the spore rat was instantly turned into a mangled pile, its body no longer intact, foul fresh blood spraying everywhere. A terrible stench rose from the spore masses on its body. The system informed him that if he was infected by the spores launched by the spore rat, he would turn into a parasite and live in the sewers for the rest of his life. So there was no way Hyun-woo would be stupid enough to absorb it with gluttony. He quickly took out the black-hilted dagger filled with supernatural power and peerless force, then crouched slightly and bent over to pry out each spore ulcer on the rat's body for use as a diversion. In the current goblin dungeon, the goblins had gathered together to brew something, each one doing a separate job, looking quite busy and hard at work. When Kirsten saw Hyun-woo return, he cheerfully came over to greet him. Hyun-woo said nothing and merely snapped his fingers. With a rustle, countless piles of miscellaneous trash poured out of his system, making the goblins on the other side flinch slightly. "What are you doing? Hurry up and take it. If you want to finish by tomorrow, you all need to move faster." Hyun-woo raised his voice and gave the order. Hearing his command, the goblins were extremely displeased, but they had no choice but to hurry over in a line and pick through the pile of leftovers. Any goblin that showed signs of protest or talked back was frightened by Hyun-woo until it burst into tears and ran away with its tail tucked like a duck. "They won't spit into the medicinal water, will they?" Hyun-woo clicked his tongue and muttered to Kirsten. "No, we have already decided to follow you, boss. If anything, we're grateful enough that you don't eat us or kill anyone." Kirsten's answer left Hyun-woo momentarily at a loss for words. Remembering the spore mass he had just pried out of the rat's body, Hyun-woo quickly took it out and showed it to Kirsten. As soon as Kirsten saw it, he let out a bleeding scream. Cold sweat poured down his entire body, and he could not understand why Hyun-woo was keeping such a dangerous object. "I finally caught that damn spore rat. If you eat this, you turn into a parasite, right? Can it be added to the blood poison?" Hyun-woo asked Kirsten curiously. Kirsten could not tell whether Hyun-woo was asking seriously or joking, since he already had the bloodthirst ability. "Why not? Suppose I go insane like last time. You understand, don't you?" Hyun-woo replied with a sly wink. "Although I trust you very much, boss, please don't push yourself too far. You've been getting stranger and stranger lately. No matter how many times you survive life and death situations, saying that you want to die is not exactly normal. You have to know how precious your own life is, because if you take your own life lightly, you will also look down on the lives of others." Kirsten poured out a stream of moral reasoning, and after sitting and thinking about it for a while, Hyun-woo felt it was fairly reasonable. While standing blankly around the ruined subway platform, Hyun-woo suddenly spotted two rat men out hunting. The timing was truly perfect. He quickly stretched out and shot upward like Spider-Man, then directly threw a small hell dart at one of them. After making his move, Hyun-woo immediately rolled once and hid in the building opposite, trying not to let the rats discover him. Then, only a second later, the rat that had been hit by Hyun-woo's dart suddenly went mad, its whole body convulsing and transforming in an extremely terrifying way, with blood-red eyes and a mouth full of saw-like teeth dripping with saliva. The infected rat charged straight at the other one and kept biting and tearing at it. Blood plasma soaked the road. After being mauled, the other rat was also infected with madness. Hyun-woo stood high above and watched the scene he had created with satisfaction, then lightly raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Immediately, the rats began vomiting blood one after another and dropped dead in an instant. This move of Hyun-woo's was truly top-notch. After finishing today's mission, he would not have a new mission until 3 days later. "If I can't clear the Zoza dungeon in one day, I'll be dragged back here midway. Fine then. I need to find an excuse to leave during the raid." Hyun-woo muttered to himself with a curl of his lips as he leaped down and landed heavily on the ground. The Zoza dungeon was like the calm sky before a storm. The atmosphere was utterly still, with no monsters appearing at all. This was the first domestic raid carried out by the alliance between the Taesung Guild and All-Purpose Lotus. From early dawn, the courtyard had been crowded with the forces of the strongest exploration formation. The average level of the participants was 30. Other skilled players would also be taking part, including the hero of the monster wave, Kong Hyun-woo, and the renowned Father Johann Hessner, adding even more intensity to the expedition. At the center was Commander Lee Ji-tae. Although he had already reached 5 stars, he still came to a 3-star dungeon to accumulate experience in dealing with monster waves for the 5-star Northern Expedition. The Zozu dungeon had an enclosed terrain, so it would be most efficient with a maximum of only 20 people. With Hyunwoo, Father Johan, and Lee Ji-tae all participating, everyone assumed this ideal exploration formation would surely be difficult to defeat. Commander Lee Ji-tae, looking neat and polished with his hair carefully styled, was now signaling the front line to take their positions. Suddenly, a soldier hurriedly pushed through the crowd and ran over to report, panting, that 2 monster waves had appeared in the junction area, leaving everyone frozen stiff. Looking at the disaster warning displayed on his phone, Hyunwoo was somewhat surprised because he had thought the 5-star junction monster wave had only just occurred. Thinking back, 10 days after the Zoza dungeon monster wave came junction. Are the dungeons linked to one another? I hope not, because I've already knocked down the first domino. Hyunwoo muttered anxiously to himself. In a technical room, the adventurers were whispering among themselves about the current situation in the dungeons. They wanted to temporarily postpone the expedition in order to mobilize hunters as reinforcements and stop the monster wave. Commander Taesung had learned of the news from Jeju Island and said he would remain there to reassure the citizens. The great unknown has contacted us. Fortunately, the elite team is in junction. They're already fighting the monsters. After checking the computer, a young man made the announcement. When they asked whether they should continue the Zoza dungeon raid as planned, Lee Ji-tae pondered for a few seconds, then nodded decisively and said he would go to junction under the stunned gazes of everyone around him. We still do not know what the situation in junction is like. We have to prepare for the worst-case scenario. In the Jojuru dungeon monster wave, a werewolf of a higher level than the dungeon itself appeared, didn't it? I will leave the Obsidian team behind, so all of you proceed with the raid as usual. Team leader CO Tae-kyung, please take temporary command here. You have raided dungeons countless times already, so you may even do better than me. If anything proves difficult, speak with Father Johan. He is a veteran as well. Besides, we also have Mr. Hyunwoo. I'll be counting on you too. Lee Ji-tae smiled gently, as light as a feather, and made the request. One briefly glanced toward Hyunwoo, her expression probing as she wondered whether Hyunwoo would agree. The Rondo dungeon is enough to give even Lee Ji-tae a headache, so there will definitely be casualties. If something happens, I'll lose all the reputation I've built up until now. Hyunwoo stood lost in thought as he calculated. Although that was what he thought, in the end, he still agreed, with the goal of doing his best to ensure everyone's survival. Rumin, who was in the office at that moment, received Hyunwoo's message promising that he would return soon. She was desperately worried about him and only hoped he would take good care of himself. As agreed, the force advanced straight into the Jojuru dungeon monster wave. The moment the light was lit, countless rat men rushed forward one after another, every one of them shrieking and roaring, looking extremely aggressive and bloodthirsty. Faced with the ferocity of these monsters, the force quickly pulled out all their weapons and strength to fight them head-on. The two sides charged into each other and beat one another down, blood spraying red like ketchup. While the whole team was sweating and struggling like that, Hyunwoo stood leisurely at a distance, assessing the situation. I have some doubts about All-Purpose Lotus, but they really are professional. One of the Crimson Butterfly is also very skilled. Johan goes without saying. He's more than fine. We'll easily wipe out these 50 monsters. Hyunwoo made that prediction as he looked at the chaotic scene before him. Mr. Kang Hyunwoo, you certainly look relaxed. A middle-aged man among the troops noticed how Hyunwoo was standing apart and immediately asked, panting. When Hyunwoo scratched his head and said he was observing everyone's abilities, the man suggested that he show off his own abilities like he often did on television. Fine, if that was what he wanted. Hyunwoo quickly stepped closer to the talkative man. With a bullet-like glare and a rather unpleasant smile, he whispered that he would try to make the man seriously regret it. The man was furious after being lightly threatened by Hyunwoo, but he had no choice but to swallow his anger and move elsewhere in frustration. Hyunwoo curled his lips in satisfaction, then quietly walked close to the rat men, lying scattered on the ground, and bent down to pick something up. Rat men have leaders called decurients. They always carry whistles like this to call for reinforcements when their kin are in danger, Hyunwoo said boldly. Of course, The man had never heard anything like that before, because this was something that would only happen a few years later after the monsters evolved. Without the slightest hesitation, Hyun-woo brought the whistle to his lips and blew it with an absurdly loud, shrill note, making everyone present gape in shock. The moment the whistle ended, another horde of rat men immediately came stampeding over like a marketplace in chaos, their footsteps shaking the ground. The troops were calling out to each other and preparing for battle, when they suddenly stopped because Hyun-woo blocked their path. "It's fine. Rest for a bit." After saying that, he did not even give them time to ask again. Quick as lightning, he turned and walked straight into the murky scene ahead. While everyone was still staring blankly like lost deer, Hyun-woo had already charged into the rats and begun fighting fiercely. Countless chilling sounds came from his direction, making everyone who heard them break out in goosebumps. Once they could no longer hear any movement, the troops turned on their flashlights and advanced step by step, walking cautiously while repeatedly calling Hyun-woo's name. What entered their eyes then was the sight of rat corpses strewn all over the ground, fresh blood splattered everywhere in black pools. After calling for him for a long time without seeing Hyun-woo, the team leader warned the group to stay on guard, then used a light creation spell. Immediately, a chaotic scene soaked in blood was clearly revealed before everyone's eyes. The rats had been completely slaughtered, not a single one remaining, and every body was smashed to pieces beyond recognition. Heads and limbs lay scattered in different places, creating a horrifying sight. "Do I still look relaxed to you? What do you think? Is this enough now?" Hyun-woo walked step by step up to the man who had provoked him earlier, curled his lips, and asked arrogantly. Only now did the man realize he had picked a fight with a madman, and he hurriedly bowed his head in a flustered apology. After receiving the apology, Hyun-woo finally relaxed his face. Ignoring the blood smeared all over him, he smiled cheerfully, making anyone who saw him in that state break out in goosebumps. "It's actually better that Lee Ji-tae isn't here. This much should be enough to scare them to death. They say fear and respect aren't all that different, after all." Hyun-woo chuckled to himself in satisfaction. The army then continued marching forward with heavy footsteps. After they had gone some distance, Captain Tae-kyung signaled for the group to stop and rest for a while. "It seems you prepared before the monsters appeared. Did you sense something?" Tae-kyung asked curiously as he sat down beside Hyun-woo. Within a radius of 150 meters ahead, there's a werewolf and a group of rat men lying in ambush. I think they'll attack when we reach the turn. And within 200 meters behind us, there are another 60 rat men waiting to intercept us. But they won't wait for us to move before attacking. What are you planning to do?" Hyun-woo asked back calmly while drinking water. Tae-kyung lowered his head and guessed that they probably would not attack right away. When Hyun-woo asked about the way out, Tae-kyung explained that the dungeon structure had changed a great deal. In the past, there had still been some common points, so it was possible to find clues leading to the boss room. But now the structure was constantly shifting, making it difficult to end things quickly. Compared to other dungeons, this place had been damaged quite severely. Flow-type dungeons were usually like this. The Jojuru dungeon had been the same. These obsidian bricks constantly split apart and merged to change the structure. So even though this place isn't large, it's still better to memorize the route. As Tae-kyung explained to Hyun-woo, he tapped on the brick wall behind him. After pressing his ear to the brick wall and listening for a moment, Tae-kyung's face turned pale, and he whispered to Hyun-woo that he seemed to hear the sound of an ambush. "No, that is extreme fear," Hyun-woo said in a low voice. Less than a second later, the ground suddenly shook violently, as if there had been an earthquake. The bricks also began moving one after another, chaotically, as if someone were pushing them around. It seemed the dungeon was in the process of transforming. Faced with this chaotic scene, Tae-kyung hurriedly shouted for the entire team to gather together. There are a lot of them. The rat men are surging in like a tsunami. Hyun-woo bared his teeth and grinned in delight as he spoke, causing Tae-kyung to grow even more flustered. Tae-kyung gritted his teeth and ordered his men to run forward and protect the exit, but unfortunately, there was no exit there at all. Before everyone's countless terrified gazes, the exit had turned into a pitch-black, bottomless abyss. A few careless people who could not stop in time all tumbled down below in a noisy cascade. Sensing the commotion caused by the rat monsters drawing closer and closer, Father Johann immediately swung his hand and chanted a spell, creating an electric defensive barrier that looked extremely sturdy. At first, the defensive barrier proved quite useful, but as time passed, more and more rats flooded in like a holiday parking lot, and the barrier could no longer hold them back. After a while of trying to defend in vain, the barrier was on the verge of collapse. The cavalry in iron armor struggled desperately to resist, but the rats drew their swords and hacked their bodies to pieces. On this side, Father Johann was still risking everything and refusing to give up, muttering another incantation in hopes of buying the cavalry a little more time and strength. "This won't hold for long. Brace yourselves." Hyunwoo spoke in a hoarse voice, his entire body ready in an offensive stance. "We need to hold out and wait for the next structural shift. Support Father Johann's team." Taekyung ordered the entire squad shakily. At the command, the entire Obsidian team immediately charged like the wind toward the electric barrier. Everyone was brimming with fighting spirit, throwing themselves into a desperate brawl with the rats, which made Hyunwoo feel somewhat surprised as he watched the scene. Not only did this army know how to fight bravely with their lives on the line, they also knew how to use their weapons skillfully to support one another in battle, making Hyunwoo quite impressed. Impressive. Should I step in now? He thought to himself. On this side, one was still using every ounce of strength she had as she charged into battle with the team. At that moment, she had only one goal in mind, to wear down the Ratman's strength. The current situation was extremely urgent, as if everything were hanging by a thread. Each person had a different role, but they all shared the same worry, whether they could hold out until the structure changed. Then, all of a sudden, a tall, dark, foul-smelling werewolf with a six-pack suddenly rushed in and swung its fist in a heaven-shaking blow against the barrier, sending an entire section of the defensive line flying straight down into the abyss. The remaining people could not help being scared out of their wits at the sight, especially Taekyung. Sweat poured off him as if he had been drenched, and he felt that they probably would not be able to hold out much longer. At the moment of despair, just as he was about to fall into its claws, one suddenly appeared and blocked the way in front of Taekyung, looking unbelievably cool. "Captain, that was dangerous. You have to survive if the rest of us are going to survive," one said. One's previous slash had opened a huge hole in the wolf's stomach, and blood poured out like a stream. With her current abilities, she could not face them head-on. "In that case, I'll fight in the air," one told herself silently. Then, quick as lightning, she bent her knees and swung her sword, flying straight at the wolf. The two sides growled and gnashed their teeth as they battered each other fiercely. Taking advantage of the wolf's opening, one happened to deliver a slash that splattered blood into its eye, causing it to clutch its face and howl in pain. After slashing it, one did not hesitate in the slightest and kicked it straight down into the abyss. Unexpectedly, as it plunged down, the wolf conveniently dragged Father Johann along with it, making one's face turn pale at this unforeseen situation. Just as she was about to fly after them and pull Father Johann back, Hyunwoo moved one step faster, shooting down into the abyss like an arrow and successfully rescuing Father Johann from an extremely dangerous situation. Not only did Hyunwoo save Father Johann, he also casually severed one of the wolf's arms. "You need to get up there and save more people," Hyunwoo shouted as he used his thread technique to fling Father Johann back upward. Seeing Father Johann flying back up, one quickly reached out and caught him, anxiously asking again and again whether he was injured. To everyone's disbelief, the dungeon transformed once again at that very moment. A brick wall suddenly rose up, blocking the space between where one stood and the abyss where Hyunwoo still had not managed to escape. One spun around in panic and pounded frantically against the wall, but unfortunately, all her efforts were in vain. In the current chaos, although Taekyung was the captain, his heart was filled with more fear and panic than anyone else's. No matter how terrifying a monster wave was, we've already lost half our forces in only the second attack. We don't even know whether they're alive or dead. If there are more casualties. He bit his lip hard, thinking blankly, then suddenly spoke. Everyone listen. I never thought the monster wave of a flow-type dungeon would change this suddenly. We've already lost many comrades. It's unfortunate, but for now, we have to keep moving. Wait, Captain. Somewhere in this dungeon, there are still many hunters alive. I'm certain of it. One cut in. Although our exploration team is very strong, to be honest, it's hard to survive alone while facing an entire army of Ratmen, Taekyung replied in a somber tone. That's true, but Hyunwoo is different. If we find him, won't we be able to suppress this dungeon? The exploration will succeed as well, and the weight of responsibility on your shoulders will be reduced. Everyone knows a monster wave is extremely dangerous. One argued. After thinking it over for a while, Taekyung also felt that what she said made a fair amount of sense. Lee Ji-tae was not here, and Hyunwoo was missing. If the exploration failed, all responsibility would fall on Taekyung. But if Hyunwoo was still alive and they found him again, everything that had just happened would become a different story. Altogether, I understand. I was agitated. We won't leave Hyunwoo behind, or anyone else. Exploration team, assemble. We're going to search this dungeon, Taekyung ordered firmly. Although one felt that Captain Taekyung was not wrong, she also badly wanted to verify why Hyunwoo resembled that person so much. Meanwhile, after that dungeon transformation, Hyunwoo had fallen straight into a ruined, abandoned city. I arrived at just the right time, but why hasn't the mission started yet? He wondered softly to himself as he glanced around at the scenery.